Brandon Thibodeau was just 18 years old, full of dreams and hope for the future. He lived in Metairie, Louisiana, a quiet suburb of New Orleans. Brandon was a senior at East Jefferson High School, where he excelled in both academics and auto shop. He had a real passion for cars, spending hours working on engines, dreaming of one day opening his own auto repair shop. His friends often saw him with grease-stained hands, tinkering with old cars in his driveway. Brandon lived with his grandmother, a woman who had gone blind and needed his daily care. Despite his age, Brandon took on the responsibility with maturity far beyond his years. He balanced school, a part-time job at a local garage, and caring for his grandmother without complaint. People in the neighborhood often commented on his kindness, noting how he always made time to help out anyone who needed a hand. Brandon had been dating Lee Gerard for 2 years. Lee, also 18, was a smart, driven young woman who shared his dreams of a bright future. They talked about getting married after graduation and starting a family. Brandon often saved his money to take Lee out to nice places like Cafe Boulud, where they would dream about their future over a nice meal. The couple was inseparable, and everyone expected them to have a long, happy life together. But beneath the surface, there was a dark secret. Brandon was having an affair with Lee's mother, Paula Gerard, a 43-year-old woman who ran a multi-level marketing company called Beauty Buys. Paulette was attractive and successful, but she had a complicated relationship with her daughter, often competing with her for the attention of men. Brandon's affair with Paulette was a secret that weighed heavily on him, and it complicated his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. Despite his dreams and plans, Brandon's life took a tragic turn. His secret affair would soon lead to a shocking and violent end, leaving the community of Metairie stunned and his loved ones devastated by the loss of a young man who had so much potential. On the morning of August 12, 2021, Metairie, Louisiana, was already feeling the oppressive summer heat. Around 8:00 a.m., Brandon Thibodeau's grandmother, Mabel, noticed something was wrong. Mabel, blind and dependent on Brandon for care, hadn't heard him moving around the house that morning. Worried, she called out to him, but there was no answer. She sensed something was off, and despite her disability, managed to dial a neighbor, Mrs. Alice Dupree, for help. Mrs. Dupree, a retired nurse who lived just 2 houses down, rushed over. She had known Brandon since he was a little boy and couldn't imagine anything being seriously wrong. But as soon as she stepped into the house, she felt a chill. The living room was eerily quiet, and there was an unusual metallic smell in the air. Mrs. Dupree called out to Brandon, but the house remained silent. She followed the scent to Brandon's bedroom. As she pushed the door open, the sight before her was unimaginable. Brandon's lifeless body lay sprawled on the floor, practically floating in his own blood. He had been brutally stabbed multiple times, and his eyes were almost gouged out. The knife, still soaked in blood, was on the floor beside him. Mrs. Dupree froze in shock, her hand trembling as she dialed 911. Her voice, usually calm and reassuring, was shaky as she reported the scene to the operator. "Oh, Sheriff, there's blood everywhere," she stammered. Within minutes, police and paramedics arrived at the modest one-story home on West Metairie Avenue. The flashing lights and the crowd of neighbors who gathered outside added to the surreal atmosphere. As the first responders entered the house, they were met with a gruesome scene that would haunt them for years. Mrs. Dupree, who had initially tried to stay calm, was now visibly shaken, leaning on another neighbor for support. Mabel, still in her chair in the living room, kept asking what was happening, unaware of the horror just a few rooms away. The once quiet neighborhood was now the epicenter of a brutal crime, one that would leave everyone reeling. The Metairie Police Department arrived at Brandon Thibodeau's home within minutes of Mrs. Dupree's 911 call on the morning of August 12, 2021. Leading the investigation was Detective Michael Mick Duval, a seasoned investigator with over 20 years on the force. Known for his no-nonsense approach and dedication, Duval was a respected figure in the department. He was joined by Detective Renee Martinez, a younger, sharp-minded officer with a keen eye for detail. As they entered the house, the crime scene was immediately overwhelming. The once cozy bedroom was now a gruesome sight. Blood spattered the walls and floor, creating a chaotic pattern that told a story of extreme violence and desperation. A smell of iron hung thick in the air, mixing with the oppressive heat of the August morning. Brandon's body lay crumpled on the floor, the brutality of the attack evident from the multiple stab wounds and the near gouging of his eyes. The kitchen knife used in the attack, a common but deadly weapon, was found beside him, covered in blood. Detective Duval, despite his years of experience, couldn't help but feel a knot in his stomach as he surveyed the scene. He knew immediately that this wasn't a random act of violence. The ferocity of the attack suggested something deeply personal. This wasn't just a murder, Duval believed. This was a crime of passion. Martinez began photographing the scene, carefully documenting every detail. They collected evidence meticulously, ensuring nothing was overlooked. The knife, the blood patterns, and any fingerprints were all carefully recorded. Forensics would later analyze these to piece together the sequence of events. As they worked, the detectives also noted the state of the rest of the house. The living room, where Brandon's grandmother, Mabel, sat, remained untouched, a stark contrast to the horror in the bedroom. This indicated that the attack was swift, catching Brandon off guard, possibly during an early morning routine. Outside, the neighbors had gathered, murmuring among themselves, trying to make sense of the tragedy that had struck their quiet community. Detective Duval knew the importance of acting quickly. He assigned officers to canvass the neighborhood, hoping someone might have seen or heard something unusual. In a close-knit place like Metairie, where everyone knew each other, there was always the chance that someone had noticed something that could break the case wide open. The first suspect on Detective Duval's list was Paulette Urard, the mother of Brandon's girlfriend Lee. Paulette was 43 years old and had always been the center of attention in Metairie's social circles. She was known for her striking looks and her successful multi-level marketing company, Beauty Buys, which sold cosmetics and skincare products. Some locals whispered that her business was a scam, but Paulette dismissed the criticism, enjoying the financial rewards in the spotlight. Paulette had a complicated relationship with her daughter Lee. While they appeared close, friends noticed an underlying tension between them, often stemming from Paulette's jealousy of Lee's youth and beauty. Paulette had a habit of competing with her daughter for attention, especially from men. This rivalry took a dark turn when Paulette began an affair with Brandon Thibodeau, her daughter's boyfriend. The affair was a closely guarded secret known only to the two, as it was the kind of secret that could destroy lives. Paulette justified the relationship as a way to reclaim her lost youth, but it was clear to that she was becoming dangerously obsessed with Brandon. When Detective Duval and Detective Martinez brought Paulette in for questioning, she was visibly shaken but tried to maintain her composure. She dressed impeccably in a tailored pantsuit, her makeup flawless, but there was a nervousness in her eyes that didn't go unnoticed. The detective started with routine questions, asking about her relationship with Brandon and her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Paulette claimed that she had been home alone, working late into the night on her business. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to her tone when asked about Brandon. She described him as a beautiful boy, but downplayed their relationship, referring to him as just her daughter's boyfriend. However, as the questioning continued, her mask began to slip. When Duval pressed her about the affair, Paulette's demeanor changed. She became defensive, her answer short and clipped. She denied the affair at first, but when presented with evidence of the affair, she broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed to the affair, but she vehemently denied having anything to do with Brandon's murder. "He was my angel boy," she cried. "Laura is my witness. I would never hurt him." Despite her emotional outburst, Detective Duval wasn't convinced. Her obsession with Brandon and the intense jealousy she harbored toward her daughter made her a prime suspect. The second suspect in the investigation was Lee Urard, the 18-year-old daughter of Paulette Urard and the girlfriend of the victim, Brandon Thibodeau. Lee was a bright, ambitious young woman who had just graduated high school in June of 2021. She was looking forward to starting college in the fall with plans to study business management at the University of New Orleans. Friends and family described Lee as kind-hearted, but sometimes overshadowed by her mother's dominant personality. Lee and Brandon had been dating for 2 years, and by all accounts, they were deeply in love. They had even talked about getting married after Lee finished high school, a plan that had excited both of their families in a conservative southern town where the average age of marriage is 18. However, the revelation of her mother's affair with Brandon had shattered Lee's world. The discovery of the betrayal left her heartbroken and furious, but she claimed that she was innocent of any involvement in Brandon's death. When detectives brought Lee in for questioning, she appeared emotionally drained. Dressed in jeans and a t-shirt from her high school senior class, she seemed much younger than her age, almost childlike in her grief. Detective Duval and Detective Martinez began the interrogation gently, asking her to recount her relationship with Brandon and how she found out about the affair. Lee's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes filled with tears. She described how she had accidentally stumbled upon sexually explicit text between her mother and Brandon a few days before his death. The discovery had led to a heated argument between her and Paulette, but Lee claimed she had tried to move past it. "I loved Brandon, and I didn't want to lose him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. However, when asked about her whereabouts on the night of the murder, Lee's story became less clear. She insisted that she had been at a sleepover at her friend Taylor's house, just a few blocks away from Brandon's house, but she struggled to provide details about the evening. Taylor, when questioned separately, confirmed that Lee had been there but mentioned that Lee had left around midnight, a few hours before the estimated time of the murder. As the detectives pressed Lee further, her demeanor shifted from sadness to defensiveness. She denied any involvement in Brandon's death, but the anger in her voice was evident. "I would never hurt him," she repeated, though her hands trembled as she spoke. When shown evidence of the affair, including Paulette's explicit texts sent to Brandon, Lee broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Her grief was raw, but it also raised questions. Was she crying out of loss, or was there something more she was hiding? Despite her emotional state, Lee maintained her innocence throughout the interrogation. She admitted to feeling betrayed and angry, but insisted she wasn't capable of murder. However, her unclear alibi and the intensity of her emotions left Detective Duval with lingering doubts. The third suspect in the investigation was Richard "Golly" Gerard, the 47-year-old father of Lee Gerard and husband of Paulette Gerard. Richard was a successful lawyer, known locally as an ambulance chaser due to his reputation for taking on personal injury cases. He was well known in Metairie, Louisiana, for his sharp legal mind and his ability to win cases, but also for his tendency to be absent from home due to his demanding work schedule. Richard was a man who valued appearances. He took pride in maintaining a picture-perfect family image, even if it meant turning a blind eye to the troubles brewing under his own roof. While Richard was often away of the office or in court, he wasn't entirely oblivious to the tension and game of sexual jealousy between Paulette and Lee. He had his suspicions about Paulette's behavior, particularly her inappropriate sexual interest in other men, but he chose to ignore it, hoping it would resolve itself. When the police called Richard in for questioning, he appeared composed, dressed in a crisp white shirt and tie, as if preparing for a day in court. Detective Duval and Detective Martinez started the interrogation by asking Richard about his relationship with his wife and daughter. Richard described his marriage to Paulette as complicated, but insisted that they had a strong bond and had sex regularly. He claimed that his relationship with Lee was also on good terms, though he admitted that they weren't as close as he would have liked, partly due to his long work hours. The detectives then shifted the focus to Brandon Thibodeau. Richard admitted that he liked Brandon and thought he was a good match for Lee. However, when confronted with the affair between Brandon and Paulette, Richard's demeanor changed. He clenched his jaw and avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with the topic. He claimed that he was unaware of the affair until after Brandon's death, stating, "If I had known, I would have put a stop to it immediately." The detectives pressed Richard on his whereabouts on the night of the murder. He stated that he had been working late at his office, reviewing a case file for an upcoming trial. He provided the names of colleagues who could vouch for his alibi, but his tone was defensive. Richard's response to the interrogation was calm but distant, giving the impression that he was holding back. As the questioning continued, Richard maintained his innocence, insisting that he had nothing to do with Brandon's death. However, his reluctance to discuss the affair and his apparent detachment from the situation left the detectives uneasy. Was Richard truly ignorant of his wife's actions, or was he hiding something to protect his family's reputation? Despite his calm exterior, Richard's evasiveness during the interrogation raised suspicions. The detectives couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story than he was laying on. On a scorching afternoon in mid-August 2021, the police received a tip that would change the course of the investigation. It was around 3:00 p.m. when Detective Duval's phone rang. The caller, who wished to remain anonymous, claimed to have critical information about Paulette Gerard, one of the key suspects in Brandon Thibodeau's murder. The tipster hinted at something more sinister than just an affair, a secret that Paulette had been hiding for years. The detectives wasted no time. They drove straight to Paulette's office, located in a small, nondescript building on the outskirts of Metairie. The sign above the door read Beauty Buys, the name of the multi-level marketing MLM company Paulette had been running for nearly a decade. From the outside, the office looked like any other small business, but inside, the detectives would uncover a shocking twist. As they entered the office, the detectives were struck by the eerie quiet. The place was filled with beauty products, shelves lined with creams, lotions, and makeup, but there were no employees in sight. Detective Martinez noticed the locked door at the back of the office. After some persuasion, Paulette's assistant, a nervous young woman in her early 20s, reluctantly handed over the key. Behind the door was Paulette's private office, and what the detectives found inside was both disturbing and revealing. The walls were covered with photographs, many nude of Brandon, most of them sexually explicit and inappropriate. In one corner, there was a makeshift love shrine dedicated to him, complete with candles, trinkets, and handwritten notes. It was clear that Paulette's obsession with Brandon had gone far beyond a mere affair. But that wasn't all. As the detectives searched the office, they stumbled upon a stack of documents that exposed the dark side of beauty buys. The Manilum scheme was not just a business. It was a scam that preyed on poor Southern women, many of whom were single mothers who were struggling financially. The documents revealed that Paulette had been exploiting these women, convincing them to invest thousands of dollars in beauty products they couldn't sell, while forcing them to work up to 20 hours a day to pay off their debts. The financial strain had ruined hundreds of lives, leaving these women in despair. The discovery of Paulette's fraudulent business practices provided a new motive for the murder. Paulette's world was beginning to crumble, and the pressure of maintaining her image, combined with her obsessive love for Brandon, may have driven her to kill. With this new evidence, the police had a clearer picture of Paulette Gerard, a woman who would do anything to protect her secrets, even if it meant committing murder. The detectives knew they were closing in on the truth, but they also realized that uncovering the full extent of Paulette's crimes would be no easy task. On August 21, 2021, the police in Metairie, Louisiana, were finally ready to make their move. After piecing together the evidence, including the disturbing findings at Paulette Gerard's beauty buy's office, they had no doubt about who was responsible for Brandon Thibodeau's brutal murder. Paulette, 43, had become increasingly sexually obsessed with her daughter's boyfriend, leading her to commit an unthinkable crime. Paulette Gerard was known as a charismatic and successful businesswoman, running a multi-level marketing MLM company called Beauty Buys. But behind her polished exterior, Paulette was hiding dark secrets. The investigation revealed that she had been having an affair with Brandon for several months. When Brandon tried to end the affair to focus on his relationship with Paulette's daughter, Lee, Paulette's obsession turned deadly. On the night of the murder, Paulette confronted Brandon in the kitchen of his grandmother's house, a place Brandon had taken Paulette to have sex many times. Fueled by jealousy and the fear of losing control, Paulette grabbed the kitchen knife and stabbed Brandon multiple times. The attack was vicious, leaving him with deep wounds and nearly gouged out eyes. After the murder, Paulette tried to cover her tracks, but her obsession with Brandon and her fraudulent business dealings eventually led the police straight to her. The arrest took place in the early morning hours of August 21. The police arrived at Paulette's upscale home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, just as the sun was rising. They knocked on the door, and Paulette answered, still dressed in her silk pajamas, clearly not expecting visitors. The detectives calmly informed her that she was under arrest for the murder of Brandon Thibodeau. Paulette's reaction was a mixture of shock and defiance. She tried to maintain her composure, but the police could see the panic in her eyes. As Paulette was handcuffed and led to the police car, her neighbors watched in disbelief. Many of them had admired Paulette for her business success, not knowing the truth behind her glamorous facade. The news of her arrest spread quickly through the community, and by the time the police car pulled away, the streets were buzzing with gossip. Back at the station, Paulette was booked and placed in a holding cell. The detectives interviewed her, but she denied everything, insisting that she was innocent. However, the evidence against her was overwhelming, and the police were confident they had the right person. The arrest brought a sense of relief to Brandon's family, who had been living in fear and uncertainty since his death. The case was far from over, but with Paulette Gerard in custody, the police were one step closer to achieving justice for Brandon Thibodeau. The trial of Paulette Gerard for the murder of Brandon Thibodeau began on November 8, 2021, at the Jefferson Parish Courthouse in Metairie, Louisiana. The case had drawn significant media attention, with local news outlets like the Times-Picayune covering every detail. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to see how the case would unfold. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Mark Tremblay, a seasoned lawyer known for his tenacity in the courtroom. Tremblay, 52, had a reputation for being thorough and relentless, and this case was no exception. From the outset, he painted a damning picture of Paulette as a woman driven by jealousy and obsession. He argued that Paulette had brutally murdered Brandon in a fit of rage after he tried to end their affair, using the physical evidence and testimony from investigators to support his case. Tremblay also exposed Paulette's Vinalum business, beauty buys, as a fraudulent scheme that preyed on vulnerable women, adding to the portrait of her as a manipulative and dangerous individual. On the defense side was attorney Charles Chuck Lemoyne, a sharp and experienced lawyer with a history of defending high-profile clients. Lemoyne, 48, was known for his calm demeanor and ability to create doubt in the minds of jurors. He argued that the evidence against Paulette was circumstantial and suggested that someone else, possibly Lee Gerard, could have committed the crime. Lemoyne also tried to humanize Paulette, portraying her as a loving mother and successful businesswoman who had been unfairly targeted by the media and the prosecution. As the trial progressed, the emotional toll on Brandon's family was evident. His grandmother, who had raised him, attended every session, clutching a worn photograph of Brandon. His girlfriend, Lee Gerard, sat with her father, both of them visibly shaken by the proceedings. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, especially during the testimony of the lead detective, who detailed the gruesome nature of Brandon's injuries and the evidence linking Paulette to the crime. On November 22, 2021, after 2 weeks of testimony and just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Paulette Gerard was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with tears of relief from Brandon's family, while Paulette remained stoic, though the color drained from her face as the words "guilty" echoed through the courtroom. The punishment was handed down on December 1, 2021. Paulette was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was a harsh but fitting end to a case that had shocked the community. For Brandon's family, the verdict brought a sense of justice, but the pain of losing him would never fully heal. The trial had also exposed the dark side of Paulette's business, leading to further investigations into beauty buys and his practices. The sentencing marked the end of one chapter but left many in the community reflecting on the tragedy and its lasting impact. After the trial, life in Metairie, Louisiana, slowly returned to normal, but the shock of Brandon Thibodeau's murder lingered in the community. The close-knit neighborhood where everyone knew each other's business was forever changed. The once bustling Gerard household became quiet. Paulette Gerard's life sentence left a void in the family that was hard to fill. Her husband, Richard Golly Gerard, a successful lawyer, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the scandal and loss weighed heavily on him. He continued his work but withdrew from social circles, avoiding the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed him everywhere he went. Lee Gerard, Paulette's daughter, struggled to move forward. The revelation of her mother's affair with Brandon and the brutal murder had shattered her world. She left Metairie shortly after the trial, enrolling in a college out of state to escape the painful memories. Though she tried to focus on her studies, the trauma was never far from her mind. Friends said she became more reserved, no longer the bright and ambitious girl she once was. The aftermath of the trial also had a significant impact on the broader community. Beauty buys, Paulette's multi-level marketing company, came under intense scrutiny. Investigations revealed the extent of the financial and emotional damage caused by the company, leading to its eventual shutdown. Many women who had invested in the business were left in debt, their lives upended by the scam. Local news outlets like WWO-TV continued to cover the fallout, and the scandal became a cautionary tale about the dangers of predatory businesses. In the end, the trial and its aftermath left a lasting mark on everyone involved. It was a tragic reminder of how quickly lives can be torn apart and how the consequences of one person's actions can ripple through an entire community. Rebecca "Becky" Frederickson was a 31-year-old woman living in San Antonio, Texas. She was known throughout her community for her warm personality and her incredible talent for baking. Becky owned and operated Sweet Treats, a popular local bakery that had become a staple in the neighborhood. Her shop was known for its delicious pastries, especially her famous chocolate chip cookies and pumpkin spice muffins, a trendy treat beloved by millennials everywhere. Becky had a loyal customer base, many of whom had been coming to her bakery since it first opened. Becky was married to Michael Frederickson, a 35-year-old financial advisor. They had been married for 5 years after meeting at a friend's wedding, and on the surface, their life seemed perfect. They lived in a cozy one-story home not far from the bakery and were well-liked in the community, with Becky often donating cakes and other baked goods to local schools and events, like the annual San Antonio Christmas Parade. However, in the months leading up to her death, Becky had been feeling a growing sense of unease. She noticed that Michael had become distant, often coming home late from work and showing little interest in their marriage even after Becky, who had always dreamed of starting a family, was diagnosed with endometriosis, which made it difficult for her to conceive. Despite these challenges, Becky remained hopeful. She threw herself into her work, often staying late at the bakery to perfect new recipes. In September 2019, Becky was preparing for the busy holiday season. She had just begun planning the bakery's Halloween-themed treats, which were always a big hit with customers. But even as she focused on her business, Becky couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong in her personal life. She tried to talk to Michael about her concerns, but he always brushed them off, leaving Becky to wonder what was really going on. Becky's friends and customers described her as sweet, generous, and hardworking. She was the kind of person who would go out of her way to help others, and her warm smile was a welcome sight to everyone who knew her. Her death would leave a void in the community that would be hard to fill. On September 15, 2019, at approximately 7:30 a.m., the lifeless body of Rebecca Becky Frederickson was discovered in the kitchen of her San Antonio home. It was a warm Sunday morning, and the city was just starting to wake up. Becky's neighbor, Karen Simmons, a 56-year-old retired schoolteacher, was the one who found her. Karen had noticed that Becky's bakery, Sweet Treats, hadn't opened on time that morning. This was unusual. Becky's bakery was almost always bustling with customers eager for her famous cookies and cakes. Concerned, Karen decided to check on Becky. She walked the short distance to Becky's home, which was just around the corner from the bakery. When she arrived, she found the front door slightly ajar, which immediately set off alarm bells. Becky was always careful about locking up, especially after a few break-ins had been reported in the neighborhood earlier that year. Karen hesitated but then pushed the door open and called out Becky's name. There was no answer. She stepped inside and noticed a strange silence. The house was neat and tidy, except for the kitchen. As Karen entered the kitchen, her heart sank. Becky was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. The rolling pin, which Becky always kept on the kitchen counter, was on the floor beside her, stained with blood. The sight was horrifying. The once warm and welcoming kitchen, where Becky had baked so many treats, was now a crime scene. Karen was in shock but managed to dial 911. Her hands trembled as she gave the dispatcher the address and explained what she had found. She stayed on the line until the police arrived, all the while trying to hold back tears. Karen later told investigators that Becky's face was so badly injured that she could hardly recognize her. When the police arrived, they found Karen standing outside, visibly shaken and in tears. She could barely speak, and the officers had to help her to a nearby bench to sit down. The neighborhood quickly buzzed with news of Becky's death, leaving everyone in disbelief. How could such a kind and gentle woman meet such a violent end? When the San Antonio Police Department received the 911 call on September 15, 2019, officers arrived at the scene within minutes. The responding officers were Surgeon Maria Diaz, a 42-year-old veteran with a reputation for being thorough and compassionate, and Officer James O'Meal, a 28-year-old who had only been on the force for 3 years, but was eager to learn. They quickly secured the area, setting up yellow crime scene tape around Becky Frederickson's small single-story home. The quiet neighborhood, typically filled with the scent of fresh pastries from Becky's bakery, was now overtaken by the flashing lights of police cars and the hum of emergency radios. As they entered the house, the officers were struck by the eerie silence. The living room was untouched, with cozy furniture and framed photos of Becky's wedding day displayed on the walls. But as they approached the kitchen, the scene changed dramatically. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and comfort, was now a gruesome crime scene. Becky's body lay in the center of the room. Her blood spattered the white-tiled floor, and the rolling pin, a symbol of her love for baking, was lying nearby, covered in blood. Surgeon Diaz's experience kicked in as she began to assess the situation. The scene indicated a violent struggle. Chairs were knocked over, and a mixing bowl had fallen to the floor, its contents spilled out. Becky's apron was stained with blood, and her hands showed defensive wounds, suggesting she had fought hard for her life. Officer O'Meal took photos of the scene while Diaz carefully noted the details. The forensic team arrived soon after. Led by the team, collected fingerprints, blood samples, and any other evidence that might help piece together what had happened. The medical examiner, Dr. Lillian Pang, a no-nonsense 55-year-old with decades of experience, arrived to examine the body. She noted that Becky had suffered multiple blunt force injuries to her head, and the time of death was estimated to be between 10 p.m. and midnight the previous evening. The brutality of the attack shocked everyone present, including the seasoned investigators. Outside, the news of Becky's death spread quickly. Neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief. Many of them knew Becky personally, having bought her baked goods for years. The sight of police cars and the knowledge of what had happened inside the house left the community in a state of shock and mourning. As the investigation continued, the police focused on gathering every piece of evidence they could find. They knew that the crime scene held the key to solving this brutal murder. They needed to find out who could have committed such a heinous act against a beloved member of the community. The investigation into Becky Frederickson's murder quickly turned its focus on her husband, Michael Frederickson. Michael, 35, was a well-known financial advisor in San Antonio. To his clients, he was the picture of professionalism, calm, dependable, and trustworthy. They have a strong reputation in the community, often seen at networking events and charity functions. However, behind closed doors, Michael was far from every woman's dream husband. He was completely different, angry with an insatiable sexual appetite his wife could never fulfill. He was a man of secrets, deeply unhappy with his life and marriage. In the days following Becky's death, investigators dug into Michael's personal life. They learned that the Fredericksons' marriage had been strained for quite some time. Becky's endometriosis diagnosis had not only shattered her dream of starting a family, but also placed significant strain on the sexual aspect of their relationship. Michael, who had once been an attentive and loving husband, grew distant and frustrated. He began spending more time at work and less time at home, often coming back late at night or even after unexplained absences of several days. Colleagues noticed that he seemed stressed, but Michael brushed off their concerns, saying it was just life stuff. The real shock came when police uncovered Michael's affair with Becky's own mother, Margaret Ruth Breedlove. Ruth, who had re-entered Becky's life only a few years earlier, was 48 and still possessed a charismatic charm and smoldering sexually her somewhat restrained daughter couldn't match. The affair had started as a harmless flirtation, but quickly escalated into something much more serious. Michael and Ruth had been secretly seeing each other for sex, even having sex on Becky's bed when she wasn't home. The affair shocked the investigation, painting a picture of a man caught between a troubled mother-daughter relationship and a tangled web of deceit. During his interrogation, Michael initially denied any involvement in Becky's murder. He maintained that he had been at the office late, working on a client's portfolio, and had come home to find Becky already dead. However, as detectives pressed him about his secret sexual relationship with Ruth, Michael's calm demeanor began to crack. He became defensive, insisting that the affair had nothing to do with Becky's death. But when detectives confronted him with evidence of his infidelity, including explicit text messages and naked pictures sent between him and Ruth, Michael's composure shattered. Police noted that Michael's behavior was suspicious, his answers were evasive, and he struggled to provide a clear timeline of his actions on the night of the murder. Investigators also found it odd that Michael showed little emotion when discussing Becky's death, often speaking about her in a detached manner as if she was just some dead person you saw on the news. Despite his attempts to distance himself from the crime, Michael's affair with Ruth provided a strong motive for murder. The pressure on Michael was mounting, and detectives were determined to get to the truth. As the investigation into Becky Frederickson's murder deepened, police turned their attention to Margaret Ruth Breedlove, Becky's 48-year-old mother. Ruth had a complicated history that raised several red flags for detectives. She had re-entered Becky's life just a few years earlier after spending decades living a free-spirited and often reckless lifestyle. Ruth had moved from Oakland, California, to San Antonio to reconnect with her daughter, but her arrival had brought more turmoil than healing. Ruth was a striking woman who had always enjoyed being the center of attention. Even in her late 40s, she maintained a youthful appearance and a sexually magnetic personality that drew people to her. After giving birth to Becky at the tender age of 17 and leaving her in the care of her own mother when Becky was just a child, Ruth had spent years drifting from one job to another and from one relationship to the next. She had worked as a house painter in Oakland, where she was known for her bold fashion choices and colorful personality. Ruth's life took a dramatic turn when she joined a cult known as the Sunshine Family in the late 1990s, a decision that led her to lose contact with Becky for nearly 2 decades. When Ruth finally resurfaced in Becky's life, it was clear that she had not changed much. She was still the same flirtatious, sexual attention-seeking woman she had always been, and she quickly became a disruptive force in Becky's marriage. Ruth openly flirted with Becky's husband, Michael, even going so far as to make out with him in front of her daughter. This behavior strained the new and already fragile relationship between mother and daughter. During her interrogation, Ruth was candid about her affair with Michael, admitting that sex she had been having with Michael was, quote, marvelous. She described the relationship as a passionate, all-consuming love affair that had given her a sense of purpose she had not felt in years. Ruth justified her actions by insisting that Michael was sexually unfulfilled in his marriage and that she was simply offering him the excitement and fulfillment he craved. To Ruth, the affair was not just a fling. It was a deep, soul-to-soul connection that she believed was meant to be. However, Ruth denied any involvement in Becky's murder. She claimed that she had been at home on the night of the killing, watching Real Housewives and sipping a glass of red wine. Her tone during the interrogation was defiant, almost as if she believed that her actions were justified. Detectives noted that Ruth showed little remorse for the affair and seemed more concerned about how the revelation of the relationship would affect her than about her daughter's death. Ruth's lack of empathy in her affair with Michael made her a strong suspect, but there was no direct evidence linking her to the crime. Despite her claims of innocence, investigators were not convinced, and they continued to scrutinize her every move. In the investigation of Becky Frederickson's murder, police also turned their attention to a third suspect, Danny La Culebra Hernandez Basco. Danny, 22, was a figure with a notorious reputation in San Antonio. Originally from Tamaulipas, Mexico, Danny had a long criminal record that included theft, assault, and drug-related charges. His nickname, La Culebra, which means the snake in English, was a reflection of his slippery, dangerous nature. Danny was known to be a rough and intimidating presence in the community. He had been spotted near Becky's bakery several times in the weeks leading up to her murder, leading to rumors that he was involved in some sort of criminal activity in the area. Witnesses reported seeing him lurking around the neighborhood, often dressed in dark clothing and keeping to the shadows. He was the kind of person who made people nervous, someone who seemed always to be on the edge of violence. When police brought Danny in for questioning, they were prepared for a difficult interrogation. Danny, however, surprised them by maintaining his innocence. He claimed he had nothing to do with Becky's murder and that he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to Danny, he had been in the area to meet up with some old friends from his neighborhood who had recently immigrated to the United States, not to cause any trouble. He insisted that he had never even met Becky and had no reason to harm her. Throughout the interrogation, Danny's demeanor was defensive. He was angry and frustrated, lashing out at the detectives who questioned him. He accused them of targeting him because of his criminal past and his Mexican nationality, calling the investigation a witch hunt. Despite his protests, police remained suspicious of Danny. His violent history and proximity to the crime scene made him a person of interest. However, as the interrogation continued, it became clear that there was little evidence to tie Danny directly to Becky's murder. There were no witnesses who could place him at the scene at the time of the crime, and no physical evidence connected him to the murder. While his presence in the area was suspicious, it wasn't enough to charge him. Danny was eventually released, but police kept him under close surveillance, aware that his volatile nature and criminal background made him a potential threat. As the investigation into Becky Frederickson's murder dragged on without a clear suspect, frustration began to set in for the detectives. But on the morning of September 18, 2019, a breakthrough came when Margaret Ruth Breedlove made a shocking revelation that changed the course of the case. Ruth, during a follow-up interview with detectives, disclosed that she was pregnant, and the father was none other than her own son-in-law, Michael Frederickson. This revelation stunned the police. It added a new layer of complexity to an already tangled web of relationships. Detectives knew that this revelation could be the key to understanding the motive behind Becky's brutal murder. The news of Ruth's pregnancy was a bombshell, suggesting that the affair between Ruth and Michael wasn't just a fling, but something far more serious. With this new information in hand, the police doubled down on their investigation. They decided to re-examine the crime scene and the evidence collected earlier, hoping to uncover any overlooked details. On September 20, 2019, 2 days after Ruth's confession, detectives revisited Becky's house, where the murder had taken place. Inside, the crime scene remained eerily untouched, a stark reminder of the violence that had occurred there. The detectives carefully combed through the area, focusing on the rolling pin that had been used as the murder weapon. Forensic experts reanalyzed the rolling pin, this time looking for any traces of DNA or fingerprints that might have been missed during the initial examination. Meanwhile, detectives also turned their attention to Michael Frederickson. Armed with the knowledge of Ruth's pregnancy, they began to put together a timeline of events leading up to Becky's murder. They learned that Michael had been increasingly anxious in the weeks before the crime, reportedly distancing himself from both his wife and Ruth. He had also made several uncharacteristic mistakes at work, which coworkers later attributed to his distracted state of mind. Could he have known Ruth was pregnant with his child? And could Becky have known this shocking secret? The breakthrough came when detectives discovered a series of deleted text messages on Michael's phone, which they were able to recover with the help of digital forensic experts. These messages revealed a heated argument between Michael and Becky on the night of her death. In the texts, Becky confronted Michael about his affair with Ruth, adding the binky emoji, and Michael, in a panic, admitted to the relationship. The argument escalated quickly, and the final message from Michael suggested he was going to, quote, "F you to death." With this new evidence, the police had what they needed to tie Michael directly to the murder. The text provided a clear motive. Michael had killed Becky in a desperate attempt to escape the fallout from his affair and Ruth's pregnancy. On the evening of September 21, 2019, after uncovering the damning text messages and learning about Ruth's pregnancy, police were confident that they had enough evidence to arrest Michael Frederickson. Michael, 35, was a successful financial advisor in San Antonio, known for his calm and collected demeanor. However, beneath the surface, he was a man trapped by his own secrets and sexual desires. His affair with his mother-in-law, Ruth, and the news that she was pregnant with his child had driven him to a breaking point. The detectives decided to approach Michael at his home, a modest house in a quiet San Antonio neighborhood. They arrived just after 8 p.m. when they knew Michael would likely be home. The air was thick with tension as they knocked on the door. When Michael answered, the TV set to how-to videos about child raising. He appeared tired and on edge, a stark contrast to the composed image he usually projected. The lead detective informed Michael that they needed to talk about new developments in the case. Michael hesitated but allowed them inside. The detectives wasted no time confronting him with the evidence: the recovered text messages, Ruth's pregnancy, and the clear motive that had emerged. As they laid out the details, Michael's calm facade began to crumble. At first, he tried to deny everything, claiming that the messages were taken out of context and that he and Becky had simply argued, as many couples do. But when Detective Diaz mentioned Ruth's pregnancy, Michael's expression changed. The color drained from his face, and he became visibly agitated, pacing the room and avoiding my contact. Realizing that the police had him cornered, Michael finally broke down. He confessed to the affair and admitted that on the night of Becky's murder, he had lost control. When Becky confronted him about the affair after Ruth literally waved her positive pregnancy test in her infertile daughter's face, he panicked. In a fit of rage and desperation, he grabbed the rolling pin from the kitchen counter and beat her to death with it. He explained that he believed eliminating Becky would somehow solve his problems, allowing him to start a new life with Ruth and their unborn child. The detectives arrested Michael on the spot, reading him his rights as they placed him in handcuffs. Michael offered no resistance. His head hung low in resignation. As the police led him out of the house, neighbors gathered on their porches, shocked to see the man they knew being taken away for such a brutal crime. The extended Frederickson family, devastated by the news, struggled to comprehend how their once loving husband and son-in-law could commit such a heinous act. For them, the arrest marked the beginning of a long and painful journey toward justice. Michael Frederickson's trial began on December 30, 2019 at the Bexar County Courthouse in San Antonio. The case quickly drew attention from local news outlets like KSA 12 and the San Antonio Express News. Reporters lined up outside the courthouse, eager to cover every detail of the shocking murder case involving a respected financial advisor, his wife, and her mother. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Lisa Perez-Brito, a sharp, no-nonsense prosecutor known for her methodical approach in the courtroom. Perez-Brito painted a chilling picture of Michael as a man driven to murder by the pressure of his affair with Ruth Breedlove and her unexpected pregnancy. She argued that Michael, unable to face the consequences of his actions, brutally killed Becky in a desperate attempt to escape his crumbling life. Perez's case was built around the text messages recovered from Michael's phone, Ruth's pregnancy, and Michael's own confession to the police. On the other side, the defense attorney, Mark Caldwell, tried to portray Michael as a man under extreme emotional distress. Caldwell, known for his ability to sway juries with his empathetic approach, argued that Michael never intended to kill Becky. Instead, Caldwell claimed that the crime was a tragic accident, the result of a heated argument that spiraled out of control. He urged the jury to consider Michael's previously clean record and the stress he was under at the time. Throughout the trial, Becky's family sat in the courtroom, their grief palpable. They listened intently as witnesses took the stand, recounting the events leading up to Becky's death. After a week of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before reaching a verdict. On January 7, 2020, Michael Frederickson was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision that was met with relief from Becky's family, who felt that justice had been served. The verdict brought some closure to Becky's loved ones, but the emotional scars left by the crime would take much longer to heal. The case left the San Antonio community in shock, a stark reminder of how quickly a seemingly perfect life can unravel. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of everyone involved in the case changed dramatically. Michael Frederickson began his life sentence at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's William P. Hobby Unit, a stark contrast to the comfortable life he once knew. Behind bars, Michael had plenty of time to reflect on the choices that led him to this point. His reputation in San Antonio was ruined, and he became a symbol of betrayal and deceit. Ruth Breedlove, reeling from the revelations that had come to light during the trial, found herself ostracized by the community. The affair with Michael, once a secret passion, was now public knowledge. Ruth moved out of San Antonio, seeking to start over in the new city where no one knew her story. However, the emotional toll of the trial and the loss of her daughter weighed heavily on her. The pregnancy, once a source of excitement, became a painful reminder of the destruction she had helped cause. Ruth ultimately decided to give the child up for adoption, believing it was the best way to ensure a better future. As the months passed, the story of Becky Frederickson's murder became another tragic chapter in San Antonio's history. But for those who had known her, the loss was a wound that would never fully heal. Johnny Ray Baxter was a 45-year-old man living in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He was a well-known real estate agent who worked for a local company called Ozark Realty. Johnny Ray had a big smile and a friendly personality, which made him popular with his clients and colleagues. He had a degree in business administration from the University of Arkansas and had been working in real estate for over 20 years. Johnny Ray was married to Darlene Baxter. Johnny Ray and Darlene seemed like a happy couple. Johnny Ray was Darlene's second husband. He had a stepdaughter named Lily Adams, who was 18 and in her first year at the University of Arkansas studying psychology. Johnny Ray got along well with Lily, or so it seemed to the outside world. Outside of work, Johnny Ray loved sailing. He owned a small sailboat named Dreamcatcher, which he often took out on Beaver Lake. He enjoyed spending weekends on the water, feeling the wind and the waves. His friends at the local marina remembered him as someone who was always willing to lend a hand and share a laugh. In the days before his death, Johnny Ray was busy with a big property deal. He was working hard to close a sale on a large commercial property in downtown Fayetteville. This deal was very important to him in his career. He was also planning a surprise anniversary trip for Darlene. He had booked a cabin in the Ozark Mountains and bought tickets to see a concert in Little Rock. He even picked out a special necklace from a local jewelry store, Sissy's Log Cabin, as a gift for Darlene. Despite his busy schedule, Johnny Ray made time to visit the local coffee shop, Arsaga's, every morning. He enjoyed reading the newspaper and chatting with the baristas. His favorite drink was a caramel latte. On April 10, 2015, 2 days before his death, Johnny Ray was seen at Arsaga's smiling and talking about his plans for the weekend. He seemed happy and excited about the future. Johnny Ray's life seemed perfect on the outside, but there were hidden troubles. His wife, Darlene, had been acting stressed and worried lately. She had noticed changes in their daughter, Lily, and was suspicious of Johnny Ray's late-night work meetings. Friends and neighbors had started to notice the tension in the Baxter household. On April 12, 2015, at about 7:30 a.m., Johnny Ray Baxter's body was discovered. The person who found him was his neighbor, Michael Everly. Michael was a 52-year-old retired school teacher who lived next door to the Baxters. Darlene had called Michael, worried because she hadn't heard from Johnny Ray since the previous night. She was out of town visiting her sister and asked Michael to check on her husband. Michael knocked on the door of the Baxter house but got no answer. He noticed that Johnny Ray's car was in the driveway, so he decided to try the door. To his surprise, it was unlocked. As he stepped inside, he immediately felt something was wrong. The house was unusually quiet. Michael called out for Johnny Ray but got no response. He walked through the living room and into the kitchen, where he saw signs of a struggle, chairs overturned and broken glass on the floor. He followed the trail of chaos to the master bedroom. When he opened the door, he was met with a gruesome sight. Johnny Ray was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, which lay nearby, covered in blood. The room was a mess, with blood splattered on the walls and furniture. It was clear that Johnny Ray had fought for his life. Michael was horrified and immediately backed out of the room, his hands shaking. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911, his voice trembling as he described what he had found. The 911 operator tried to keep him calm, asking him to stay on the line until the police arrived. The news of Johnny Ray's death quickly spread through the neighborhood. Maple Street was soon filled with police cars, and curious neighbors stood outside, whispering to each other about the shocking event. Local news stations like KRSM and KN2A sent reporters to cover the story, and by noon, it was the top news in Fayetteville. Michael, who had been friends with Johnny Ray for years, was in a state of shock. He had never expected to find his neighbor and friend dead in such a brutal manner. He later told reporters that Johnny Ray was a good man who didn't deserve such a terrible fate. The discovery of Johnny Ray Baxter's body marked the beginning of a complex and tragic investigation, one that would uncover hidden secrets and lead to shocking revelations about those closest to him. The police arrived at the Baxter home quickly after Michael Everly's 911 call on April 12, 2015. The first officers on the scene immediately secured the area, making sure no one entered or left the house. Soon after, Detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter arrived to lead the investigation. Detective Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey was known for her sharp mind and attention to detail. At 38 years old, she had solved many difficult cases. Her partner, Detective James Carter, was 42 and had a reputation for his methodical approach. Together, they made a strong team. As the detectives walked through the house, they saw signs of a struggle. The living room had overturned chairs and broken glass. The kitchen had more chaos, with dishes scattered on the floor. When they reached the master bedroom, they were met with a grisly scene. Johnny Ray Baxter lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. He had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, which lay nearby, covered in blood. The walls and furniture were splattered with blood, showing the violence of the attack. Detective Mitchell-Kinsey noted the hammer as the murder weapon and ordered it to be bagged as evidence. The crime scene was chaotic and disturbing. The detectives and forensic team took many photos and collected samples. They used gloves to carefully pick up items, making sure not to contaminate any evidence. Blood samples, fingerprints, and the hammer were all collected and sent to the lab for analysis. Outside, neighbors watched as the police worked. The local news stations, KFSM and KN2A, were there too, reporting on the shocking murder. Reporters spoke to neighbors who described Johnny Ray as a friendly and well-liked man. The media coverage added pressure to solve the case quickly. Detectives Mitchell-Kinsey and Carter interviewed Michael Everly, who was still shaken from discovering the body. He described finding the door unlocked and seeing the mess inside the house. His detailed account helped the detectives piece together the events leading up to the murder. By the end of the day, the police had gathered a lot of evidence but still had many questions. Who could have committed such a brutal act? Why would someone want to kill Johnny Ray? The detectives knew they had a difficult case ahead of them, but they were determined to find the answers. The first suspect in Johnny Ray Baxter's murder was his wife, Darlene Baxter. Darlene was 34 years old and worked as an accountant for a local firm called Razorback Accounting. She was intelligent, meticulous, and hardworking. Darlene had a tough past. She became a mother at 16 and worked as a stripper to support herself and her daughter, Lily. Despite these challenges, she built a successful career and was known for her strong-willed nature. Darlene had recently noticed changes in her daughter Lily's behavior and grew suspicious of Johnny Ray's late-night work meetings. Friends and neighbors described Darlene as increasingly stressed and on edge in the weeks before the murder. Some said they heard arguments between her and Johnny Ray. Detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter brought Darlene in for questioning on April 13, 2015. Darlene appeared calm but was clearly distressed. She maintained that she had been out of town visiting her sister Nancy in Little Rock. She provided photos and text messages to support her alibi, but the detectives still had doubts. During the interrogation, Darlene spoke about her relationship with Johnny Ray. She admitted they had been arguing more lately, mainly about his work and the amount of time he spent away from home. She denied any involvement in his death, insisting she loved her husband despite their problems. The detectives asked Darlene about the night of the murder. She explained that she had left for Little Rock on the afternoon of April 11 and stayed with Nancy until the morning of April 12. Nancy confirmed this story when the detectives called her. However, it couldn't ignore the tension in Darlene's voice when she spoke about Johnny Ray and the changes she noticed in Lily. The police also searched Darlene's car and belongings for any evidence. They found nothing directly linking her to the murder, but they did find a diary in which Darlene had written about her frustrations and suspicions. These entries painted a picture of a woman under immense stress and emotional turmoil. Despite her alibi, Darlene remained a prime suspect. The detectives continued to look into her past, interviewing friends, family, and coworkers. They hoped to find a motive or any clue that could tie her to the crime. The pressure on Darlene grew as the investigation progressed, but she remained steadfast in her innocence. The investigation into Darlene Baxter was thorough, yet many questions remained unanswered. The detectives knew they had to keep digging to uncover the truth behind Johnny Ray's brutal murder. The second suspect in Johnny Ray Baxter's murder was his stepdaughter, Lily Adams. Lily was 18 years old and a freshman at the University of Arkansas, where she was studying psychology. She was known for her outgoing and sociable personality. Her friends described her as bright and ambitious, always eager to learn new things. Lily had a complicated relationship with her stepfather, Johnny Ray. It was revealed during the investigation that their relationship had evolved into a secret affair. This affair made Lily feel guilty and conflicted, especially as she saw the strain it put on her mother, Darlene. Detectives Sarah Mitchell Kinsey and James Carter brought Lily in for questioning on April 14, 2015. Lily appeared nervous but cooperative. She admitted to the affair with Johnny Ray, explaining that it had started about 6 months earlier. She said she had been feeling lonely and confused, and Johnny Ray had been there for her. She insisted she never wanted to hurt anyone. During the interrogation, Lily explained how she had confided in a close friend about the affair and her feelings of guilt. This friend, whose name was not disclosed, confirmed Lily's story to the detectives. Lily described the last time she saw Johnny Ray, which was the night before his death. She said they had argued about the affair and the impact it was having on their family. The detectives asked Lily about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Lily said she had been in a friend's house, studying for a midterm exam. Her friend confirmed this alibi, saying that Lily had stayed there until the early morning hours of April 12th. Despite the alibi, the detectives were suspicious of the emotional turmoil that Lily was going through. The police also searched Lily's dorm room and her belongings for any evidence. They found nothing directly linking her to the murder, but did find several letters and notes between her and Johnny Ray. These notes showed the depth of their relationship and the emotional struggles they both faced. Despite her alibi and the lack of direct evidence, Lily remained a prime suspect due to the affair and the emotional tension it created. The detectives continued to interview her friends and classmates, hoping to find any inconsistencies or new leads. The pressure on Lily grew as the investigation continued, but she maintained her innocence and expressed deep regret for the affair. The investigation into Lily Adams was thorough, but the detectives still had many questions. They knew they had to keep digging to find the truth behind Johnny Ray Baxter's brutal murder. On April 17, 2015, 5 days after Johnny Ray Baxter's murder, the police received a significant break in the case. It was a cool, cloudy morning when a jogger discovered a suspicious item in the park near Beaver Lake. He noticed a plastic bag partially buried under some leaves near a bench. Curious, he opened it and found a blood-stained shirt and a pair of gloves. He immediately called the police, and within minutes, patrol officers Karen Lewis and Tom Martinez arrived at the scene. They secured the area and called in detectives Sarah Mitchell Kinsey and James Carter. The detectives quickly assessed the situation and bagged the items for forensic analysis. The detectives were cautious but hopeful that this new evidence would provide a breakthrough in the case. They brought the items back to the Fayetteville Police Department's forensic lab. Forensic analysts found that the blood on the shirt matched Johnny Ray's DNA. Additionally, the gloves had fingerprints that were not Johnny Ray's. This new evidence shifted the focus of the investigation. The detectives revisited their list of suspects and re-examined their alibis. They also reviewed the surveillance footage from the park and nearby areas. This extensive review led them to a surprising discovery. A figure matching Lily Adams' description was seen entering the park late on the night of the murder. Detectives Mitchell Kinsey and Carter brought Lily in for a second round of questioning. This time, Lily was visibly more nervous. She claimed she had gone to the park to clear her head and had no idea about the bloody items. The detectives pressed her for more details, but Lily stuck to her story, albeit shakily. The forensic team continued their analysis and found another critical piece of evidence: hair fibers on the gloves that matched Darlene Baxter's DNA. This discovery complicated the case further and indicated the possible involvement of both mother and daughter. On April 18, 2015, the detectives called Darlene back for questioning. She seemed calm but concerned when presented with the new evidence. Darlene admitted to knowing about the gloves but insisted she had nothing to do with the murder. She said she had worn the gloves while gardening and couldn't explain how they ended up near Beaver Lake. The police were now more determined than ever to solve the case. They knew they were close to uncovering the truth but needed to carefully piece together the final puzzle. The discovery of the new evidence was a pivotal moment in the investigation, providing crucial leads and intensifying the search for Johnny Ray Baxter's murderer. The third suspect in the murder of Johnny Ray Baxter was his ex-wife, Diddy Baxter. Diddy, aged 46, was known for her hot-tempered and aggressive nature. She had a contentious relationship with Johnny Ray and had never approved of his marriage to Darlene. Diddy lived in Thetaville and worked as a manager at a local grocery store, Harp's Food Stores. Detectives Sarah Mitchell Kinsey and James Carter decided to bring Diddy in for questioning on April 19, 2015. Diddy arrived at the police station appearing defiant and uncooperative. She had a reputation for speaking her mind and not holding back her opinions. During the interrogation, Diddy admitted that she and Johnny Ray had a rocky relationship. She described their marriage as tumultuous and full of arguments. Diddy expressed her disdain for Darlene, calling her a homewrecker and blaming her for the end of her marriage. However, Diddy vehemently denied any involvement in Johnny Ray's murder. The detectives pressed Diddy about her whereabouts on the night of April 11, 2015. Diddy claimed she was at home, watching TV and drinking wine. She mentioned watching an episode of Dancing with the Stars and going to bed early. There were no witnesses to confirm her alibi, which made the detectives suspicious. The police searched Diddy's home for any evidence that could link her to the crime. They found a few items of interest, including a set of gardening gloves similar to the ones found at the park. However, forensic analysis showed no blood or DNA on these gloves. Despite her alibi and the lack of direct evidence, the detectives continued to probe Diddy's potential motive. They discovered that Diddy had recently learned about Johnny Ray's affair with Lily, which added another layer of tension and potential anger. Friends and coworkers told the detectives that Diddy had been particularly upset and vocal about the affair, calling Johnny Ray a disgrace and expressing her anger to anyone who would listen. The detectives also interviewed Diddy's neighbors, who reported hearing loud arguments coming from her house in the days leading up to the murder. One neighbor, Mrs. Everly, said she heard Diddy yelling about betrayal and lies. Although Diddy remained the suspect, the detectives found it challenging to gather enough evidence to charge her. She was aggressive during the interrogation, but maintained her innocence. The detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence to link her to the crime. The investigation into Diddy Baxter added another layer of complexity to the case, as the detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading to Johnny Ray's murder. On April 21, 2015, the breakthrough in Johnny Ray Baxter's murder case finally came. After days of investigating, detectives Sarah Mitchell Kinsey and James Carter found a crucial piece of evidence. A surveillance camera from a nearby gas station had captured footage of Darlene Baxter driving toward Beaver Lake late on the night of the murder. This was a significant lead that contradicted Darlene's alibi. Detectives Mitchell Kinsey and Carter reviewed the footage carefully. It showed Darlene's car, a blue Honda Civic, passing the gas station at around 11:30 p.m. on April 11. This placed her near the crime scene at the crucial time. With this new evidence, the detectives were confident they had found Johnny Ray's killer. On the morning of April 22, 2015, the police arrived at Darlene Baxter's workplace, Razorback Accounting. It was a sunny day, and the local news stations, including KFSM and KNWA, were already covering the latest developments in the case. Darlene was in her office when the police entered. She looked surprised but remained composed as they informed her of her arrest for the murder of her husband. As Darlene was led out in handcuffs, she maintained her innocence, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The affair between Johnny Ray and Lily had driven Darlene into a fit of rage. She felt deeply betrayed by both her husband and her daughter. The detectives believed that on the night of the murder, Darlene confronted Johnny Ray. The confrontation escalated into violence, and Darlene grabbed the hammer, fatally striking him multiple times. Darlene's arrest shocked the community. Neighbors and friends couldn't believe that the hardworking, intelligent woman they knew was capable of such a violent act. The news spread quickly, with headlines in the Fayetteville Observer and segments on local news stations detailing the arrest. Johnny Ray's family had mixed reactions. Some were relieved that the murderer had been caught, while others were devastated by the betrayal. Lily was particularly heartbroken. She had lost both her stepfather and her mother in a matter of days. The emotional toll on the family was immense. As Darlene was taken to the police station, she continued to deny her involvement. However, the detectives were confident in their findings. The surveillance footage, combined with the forensic evidence and Darlene's conflicting statements, painted a clear picture of her guilt. The community of Fayetteville was left to grapple with the tragic events. Johnny Ray Baxter's murder had uncovered deep family secrets and left a lasting impact on those who knew him. The police had solved the case, but the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. The trial of Darlene Baxter for the murder of her husband, Johnny Ray Baxter, began on July 15, 2015, at the Washington County Courthouse in Fayetteville. The courtroom was packed with reporters from local news stations like KSSM and KNOA, as well as concerned members of the community. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Robert Stevens, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough and relentless in the courtroom. He argued that Darlene's motive for the murder was her discovery of the affair between Johnny Ray and Lily. Stevens painted a picture of a woman pushed to her breaking point by betrayal and emotional turmoil. He presented the surveillance footage of Darlene's car near Beaver Lake, the forensic evidence from the crime scene, and the conflicting statements she had given to the police. On the other side, the defense was led by attorney Michelle Williams, a 39-year-old known for her calm demeanor and sharp legal mind. She argued that Darlene was innocent and that the evidence was circumstantial. Williams suggested that someone else could have committed the murder, perhaps out of jealousy or anger. He questioned the reliability of the surveillance footage and pointed out that no witnesses had seen Darlene commit the crime. Throughout the trial, Johnny Ray's family sat in the front row, watching the proceedings with a mixture of anger and sadness. Lily, in particular, struggled with the emotional weight of the trial. She had lost her stepfather and now faced the possibility of losing her mother to a long prison sentence. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. On August 3, 2015, the jury found Darlene Baxter guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was tense as the verdict was read. Darlene showed little emotion, while Johnny Ray's family wept and hugged each other. The local news immediately reported the verdict, and the story was covered extensively in the Fayetteville Observer. Judge Lisa Everly sentenced Darlene to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She stated that the evidence clearly showed Darlene's guilt and that the crime was a result of intense personal betrayal and anger. The judge expressed sympathy for Johnny Ray's family and hoped the sentence would bring them some measure of closure. The reaction to the verdict was mixed. Some in the community felt justice had been served, while others believed the sentence was too harsh, considering Darlene's difficult past and the emotional stress she was under. Johnny Ray's family, however, felt a sense of relief that the ordeal was over and that the person responsible for his death was held accountable. The trial and sentencing marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Baxter family and the community of Fayetteville. The murder and its aftermath had left deep emotional scars, but the verdict provided a sense of justice and a step toward healing. After Darlene Baxter's trial and sentencing, life slowly began to return to normal for those involved in Johnny Ray Baxter's tragic murder case. For Darlene, now serving her sentence at the Arkansas Department of Correction, life took on a stark routine. She was allowed limited visits from family and friends, with strict rules governing her daily activities. The media coverage surrounding the trial gradually faded, replaced by new stories and events in Fayetteville like the annual Bikes, Blues, and BDQ motorcycle rally. Lily Adams, now 19, returned to the University of Arkansas to continue her studies in psychology. She struggled with guilt and grief over her role in the affair that ultimately led to her stepfather's death. Lily sought counseling to help her cope with the emotional aftermath and worked hard to rebuild relationships with her family. She distanced herself from media attention, focusing on her studies and volunteer work at local animal shelters. Meanwhile, Detective Sarah Mitchell Kinsey received recognition for her role in solving the high-profile case. She continued her work at the Fayetteville Police Department, investigating other crimes and mentoring younger detectives. Detective James Carter transferred to the Northwest Arkansas Drug Task Force, where he applied his investigative skills to combating drug-related crimes in the region. In the community of Fayetteville, the impact of Johnny Ray's murder lingered. Neighbors and friends remembered him as a friendly and successful real estate agent who loved sailing on Beaver Lake. The local Rotary Club held a memorial service in his honor, and a plaque was installed at the Fayetteville Town Center to commemorate his life and contributions to the community. Johnny Ray's family, especially his first wife, Diddy, found solace in each other's company and support. Diddy focused on her career at Hart's Food Stores and became involved in local charity events, like the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure in Bentonville. She remained vigilant about keeping her family close and supporting her grandchildren, who missed their stepfather dearly. As time passed, the scars left by Johnny Ray's murder began to heal, though the memory of the tragic events of April 2015 remained a part of Fayetteville's history. The community rallied around the Baxter family, offering support and understanding as they moved forward from the ordeal. This tragic case of love, betrayal, and murder serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. Valerie Camden, a 41-year-old woman from Knoxville, Tennessee, was well known in her community. She owned a successful pool supply store, Valerie's Pools, which many locals trusted for their pool needs. Valerie was known for her bright and cheerful personality. She always had a smile on her face and was dedicated to helping her customers. Valerie had a strong educational background, having graduated from the University of Tennessee with a degree in business administration. She applied her knowledge and skills to make her store a beloved local business. Valerie's personal life was challenging but inspiring. In her early 20s, she went through a difficult divorce and became a single mother to her triplets, Ethan, Nathan, and Alan, all of whom are deaf. Despite the financial strain, Valerie worked tirelessly to provide for her children. She faced a significant debt to provide for them, but she never let it dampen her spirit. Valerie was a loving mother who supported her children in every way possible. She was actively involved in the deaf community, advocating for better resources and opportunities for children with disabilities. In the days leading up to her death in November 2018, Valerie was excited about the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. She planned to host a big family dinner and had already started preparing. Valerie was also working on expanding her business, hoping to open a second store in the next town over. She dreamed of providing better financial stability for her family and giving back to the community that supported her. Valerie had a close-knit group of friends and was known to frequent local spots like Starbucks and the local Waller. Her friends described her as kind-hearted and always ready to lend a helping hand. She was involved in various community activities, including volunteering at the local food bank and participating in charity events. Valerie's dedication extended beyond her family and business. She was a passionate advocate for other single mothers, especially those raising children with disabilities. She often spoke at local events and used her story to inspire others. Valerie's dreams were big, and her heart was even bigger. She hoped to create a foundation to support single mothers and provide scholarships for children with disabilities. Valerie Camden was a remarkable woman whose life, though filled with challenges, was a testament to strength, love, and determination. However, her brutal murder would erase all those achievements in the mind of Knoxville for years to come. On the morning of November 22, 2018, Thanksgiving Day, Knoxville was unusually cold and overcast. At around 8:30 a.m., Ethan Camden, one of Valerie's 19-year-old deaf triplets, made a horrifying discovery. Ethan, who had just woken up, went to check on his mom. He found Valerie's lifeless body in the master bathroom of their home. She was naked and strangled with a rope in the shower. Ethan was in shock. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. His hands trembled, and he felt frozen in place. After a few moments, he snapped out of his daze and ran to get his brothers, Nathan and Alan. The three of them stood there, stunned and scared, not knowing what to do. Nathan, who had more hearing and had better speaking skills than the other triplets, grabbed the phone and called 911. His voice was shaky as he tried to explain the situation. "My mom. She's in the bathroom. She's not moving," he cried, his voice almost unintelligible. The 911 operator tried to calm him down and give more details. Within minutes, the police and emergency responders were on their way. When the first responders arrived, They were met with a heart-wrenching scene. The triplets were huddled together, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. Officer Jane Miller was the first to enter the bathroom. She had been with the Knoxville Police Department for over 15 years and thought she had seen it all. But the sight of Valerie's lifeless body left her speechless. She took a deep breath and called for backup. As more officers arrived, they began to secure the crime scene. They immediately noticed the cleanliness of the bathroom, except for the signs of a struggle. There were no obvious fingerprints or signs of forced entry. While the police worked inside, the triplets were taken outside and given blankets to keep warm. The neighbors started to gather, whispering among themselves. Local news channels, including WBIR-TV, arrived to cover the breaking news. Reporters tried to get statements from the police and neighbors, but everyone was too shocked to say much. Ethan, Nathan, and Alan were taken to the police station to give their statements. They were still in a state of shock, struggling to understand what had happened. The police knew they had to act quickly to find out who was responsible for this horrific crime. When the Knoxville Police Department arrived at the Camden home on November 22, 2018, it was around 9:00 a.m. The sky was overcast, and the cold air hinted at the coming winter. Officers moved quickly to secure the area and keep onlookers away. Detective Catherine Bernard and Officer Daniel Ford led the investigation. They were known for their thorough and methodical work. Detective Bernard first spoke with Ethan, Nathan, and Alan Camden, who were still visibly shaken. She gently asked them to describe what happened, and then sent them to the station for detailed statements. Her primary focus now was on the crime scene. The master bathroom, where Valerie Camden's body was found, was eerily clean. Valerie lay naked in the shower, strangled with a rope. The scene suggested a struggle, but there were no signs of forced entry, and the rest of the house was undisturbed. Detective Bernard noted that this indicated the killer was someone Valerie knew and trusted. Detective Bernard and Officer Ford examined the bathroom carefully. The rope used to strangle Valerie was a simple, sturdy type, the kind you might find at a hardware store like Home Depot, known worldwide as America's friendliest big box store. They collected fingerprints from various surfaces, including the shower and door handles. The crime scene unit used luminol to detect any traces of blood that might have been cleaned up. Outside the house, the police set up perimeter. Neighbors gathered, whispering about the tragedy. Local news stations like WBIR-TV and the Knoxville News Sentinel sent reporters to cover the story. The media presence added pressure on the police to find answers quickly. Detective Bernard called in a forensic team to assist with the investigation. They photographed the scene, collected samples, and searched for any overlooked clues. The team also checked for surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses, hoping to find any suspicious activity. The police interviewed the Camden family's neighbors. One neighbor mentioned she saw a car she didn't recognize parked near the Camden house the night before. She couldn't recall the make or model but thought it was dark-colored. Another neighbor said he heard arguing coming from the Camden home earlier in the week, but he thought it was just a typical family disagreement you might hear around Thanksgiving. As the investigation continued, Detective Bernard and her team worked around the clock. They reviewed Valerie's phone records, emails, and social media accounts. They wanted to understand her relationships and any possible motives for her murder. The clean crime scene, the lack of forced entry, and the methodical nature of the murder pointed to a calculated and deliberate act. Detective Bernard knew this was just the beginning. They needed to dig deeper into Valerie's life and those closest to her to uncover the truth. Brett Camden, Valerie's 61-year-old second husband, was the first person the police investigated. Brett was an investment fund manager well known in Knoxville's financial circles. Outwardly, he seemed like a loving and supportive husband, but the police had to look deeper. Brett was at work when the police contacted him about Valerie's death. He appeared shocked and distraught, immediately driving to the police station. Detective Bernard met with him in a quiet room, where he slumped into a chair, his face pale. Brett explained that he had left for work early that morning and had no idea what happened to Valerie. He described their marriage as happy, but admitted they had their share of arguments, mostly about money. Valerie was in significant debt, around $200,000, due to the cost of raising her deaf triplets as a single mother. Brett said he tried to help, but it was a constant source of stress. The police asked Brett about his relationship with the triplets. He claimed to care for them deeply, even though he wasn't their biological father. Detective Bernard noted his calm and composed demeanor, but she also sensed he was hiding something. Brett's colleagues at his investment firm described him as a hard worker but very controlling. Some even mentioned he could be manipulative. This raised red flags for Detective Bernard. She dug deeper into Brett's personal life, interviewing friends and neighbors. Rumors surfaced that behind closed doors, Brett was not as loving as he appeared. Some neighbors said they heard loud arguments coming from the Camden house. One of Valerie's friends mentioned that Valerie once showed her a bird mark on her arm, which she claimed Brett had caused with a fireplace poker. The police brought Brett back for further questioning. This time, he seemed more nervous. Detective Bernard asked him directly about the bird marks and the rumors of him being controlling. Brett's calm facade cracked. He denied everything, but his voice was shaky. He insisted that he loved Valerie and would never hurt her. To confirm Brett's alibi, the police reviewed security footage from his office building. It showed Brett arriving at work at 7:00 a.m. as he claimed. However, there was a gap of about 30 minutes when Brett's whereabouts were unaccounted for. With more questions than answers, the police kept Brett under close watch. They needed more evidence to determine if Brett was involved in Valerie's murder. The investigation was far from over. Ethan Camden, one of Valerie's 19-year-old death triplets, was the second person the police investigated. Ethan had recently graduated from a school for the deaf and dreamed of becoming a graphic designer. However, he had struggled to find a job and had turned to drugs to cope with the stress and chaos at home. Ethan was known for his shy and reserved nature, often escaping into his art. When the police brought Ethan in for questioning, he looked scared and confused. Detective Bernard communicated with him through a sign language interpreter. She asked Ethan about his relationship with his mother and stepfather. Ethan described his mother as loving and supportive, but his feelings toward Brett were more complicated. He admitted that Brett was controlling and sometimes abusive, but he was too afraid to say anything more. Ethan had a weak alibi for the morning of Valerie's murder. He said he was at home, asleep in his room, but there were no witnesses to confirm this. Detective Bernard asked him about his drug use, and Ethan confessed to using marijuana to deal with his anxiety. He insisted that he would never hurt his mother, tears streaming down his face as he signed his responses. The police searched Ethan's room and found drug paraphernalia, but nothing that directly connected him to Valerie's murder. They also reviewed his social media accounts and phone records, looking for any clues. Ethan's online activity showed a young man struggling with his emotions, but not someone planning a murder. Detective Bernard interviewed Ethan's friends from deaf school. They described him as talented and quiet, often keeping to himself. Some friends mentioned that Ethan had talked about his stepfather's harsh behavior, but never hinted at any violent intentions. The investigation revealed that Ethan had been under immense pressure. The family's financial troubles, combined with the abuse he saw from Brett against his mother, had taken a toll on him. Detective Bernard considered Ethan a potential suspect due to his weak alibi and emotional turmoil, but she needed more concrete evidence. As the police continued to dig into Ethan's background, they found no solid proof linking him to the crime. Detective Bernard's intuition told her that Ethan was more of a victim in this situation, trapped in a toxic household. The focus of the investigation began to shift away from Ethan as new leads emerged. In late November 2018, the investigation into Valerie Camden's murder led the police to a third suspect, Nathan Camden, one of Valerie's triplets. Nathan, 19, was a star athlete on his deaf school's basketball team. His coaches often praised his dedication and talent. Nathan was outgoing, popular, and well-liked by his peers, but he struggled under the pressure of his stepfather's expectations and his need for approval. Nathan dreamed of playing basketball professionally. He had posters of NBA stars like LeBron James and Steph Curry on his bedroom walls. His friends saw him as cheerful and friendly, but those closer to him knew about the stress and fear he faced due to Brett's behavior. Detective Catherine Bernard and her team decided to bring Nathan in for questioning. On a crisp, cold morning in late November, they'd met Nathan at the police station. Through a sign language interpreter, Nathan shared his side of the story. He appeared nervous but cooperative with the investigators. Nathan explained that his relationship with Brett had always been strained. Brett's controlling nature and high expectations had caused Nathan significant stress. Brett often belittled him for not having six-pack abs, comparing him unfavorably to his brothers and looks. During the interrogation, Nathan revealed more about Brett's abusive behavior. He recounted instances where Brett had used threats and manipulation to control him and his brothers. Nathan's testimony painted a clearer picture of the toxic environment they had been living in. The police scrutinized Nathan's alibi for the night of Valerie's murder. Nathan claimed he had been at another deaf friend's house, watching the Tennessee Volunteers game on TV.
His friend confirmed this alibi, and surveillance footage from a local convenience store showed Nathan and his friend buying snacks during the game. Despite Nathan's cooperation, the police needed more evidence to eliminate him as a suspect. They continued to investigate, analyzing phone records, messages, and other digital footprints. Throughout the day, the police worked diligently to gather all possible evidence from the crime scene to see if Nathan might be the killer. They knew that solving this case would require piecing together the puzzle of Valerie's fraught family relationships.
On a chilly Saturday morning of November 24, 2018, a breakthrough came when a neighbor discovered a hidden USB drive in her attic while cleaning. Suspecting it didn't belong to her, she promptly contacted the authorities. Detective Bernard and Officer Daniel Ford responded swiftly, retrieving the USB drive from her home. Back at the police station, forensic experts examined the flash drive and found several video files. When they played the videos, they were horrified. The recording showed Valerie's triplets, Ethan, Nathan, and Alan, undressing and performing suggestive dances while naked, some with quite complex choreography based on that of K-pop boy bands, both individually and as a group. The videos were addressed to someone named Jonathan, incidentally Brett's middle name. Detective Bernard felt sick as she watched the footage, vomiting profusely into a nearby trash can. It was clear that the triplets were being manipulated into a sexual relationship with someone, most likely Brett Cambin, their stepfather. The police felt confident the videos revealed Brett Cambin's dark secret. The police immediately brought Ethan, Nathan, and Alan back in for questioning. With the help of a sign language interpreter, the triplets shared their story. They explained how Brett had manipulated them for the past year into sexual relationships, pitting them against each other in various sex games with promises of more time spent with him for the winner. They said they had no idea there was anything wrong with that. Searching Brett's home office, the police discovered additional hidden USB drives containing sex tapes and a journal detailing Brett's disturbing relations with the triplets. In it, he detailed his secret relationship with the triplets, including graphic description of his sex games, and referring to the triplets as his boy harem. Detective Bernard knew this new evidence was crucial. It not only implicated Brett and Valerie's murder, but also uncovered a deeper level of abuse. With this new evidence, the police had a clearer picture of Brett's possible motive. Had he killed Valerie to keep his dark secrets hidden? Police knew Valerie would have planned to leave him and take the triplets with her if she found out. Could Brett, afraid of losing control and facing exposure, have decided to silence Valerie forever? As November 2018 drew to a close, the Knoxville police made a breakthrough in the Valerie Camden murder case. After weeks of investigation, the evidence pointed clearly to Brett Cambin, Valerie's husband. Brett, 61, worked as an investment fund manager. Outwardly, he appeared to be a supportive and loving spouse, but the evidence painted a horrifyingly different picture. Brett was controlling and manipulative. He used threats and even physical violence to keep Valerie under his control. Even worse, the police uncovered a twisted and abusive sexual relationship between Brett and the triplets. He referred to them as his boy harem, exploiting their vulnerability and deafness to maintain his dominance. Detective Catherine Bernard and her team had pieced together Brett's motive for killing Valerie. Valerie had tired of his abuse and planned to lead Brett and take the triplets with her. Brett, afraid of losing his control and having his dark secrets exposed, decided to silence her forever. On the morning of November 30, 2018, with clear skies and a chilly breeze, the police moved in to arrest Brett Cambin. They arrived at his upscale home in Knoxville's affluent neighborhood. Brett was taken by surprise when the officers, led by Detective Bernard, knocked on his door. He tried to maintain his composure, but it was evident he was shocked. Brett was handcuffed and read his rights. He showed little emotion, maintaining a cold and distant demeanor. As he was escorted to the police car, neighbors watched in disbelief. The arrest was a stark contrast to the facade Brett had maintained for so long. Valerie's family, especially her triplets, were relieved but emotionally shattered. They had lived in fear and manipulation for years. The news of Brett's arrest brought a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and anger. They hoped for justice and a chance to heal from the trauma they had endured. Detective Bernard was determined to ensure Brett faced the full consequences of his actions. She knew the case against him was strong. With the evidence gathered from the hidden USB drives, his journal, and the testimonies of the triplets, Brett's arrest marked a significant turning point in the investigation. The police had not only solved Valerie's murder, but also uncovered the horrifying abuse her family suffered under. The arrest of Brett Camden marked a significant step in the process, bringing closure to Valerie's grieving family and friends. The trial of Brett Camden began in early December 2018, just as the Knoxville community was preparing for the holiday season. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators, all eager to hear the details of the case that had shocked the city. The prosecutor, Mark Schwartzel, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough on crime, laid out a compelling case against Brett. He detailed Brett's abusive behavior, the manipulation of the triplets, and the cold-blooded murder of Valerie Camden. Thompson presented the videos found on the USB drives, Brett's journal, and the testimonies of Ethan, Nathan, and Alan. The evidence painted a clear picture of Brett's guilt. On the defense side, attorney Lizandra Martinez, 50, known for her tenacity in defending difficult cases, argued that Brett was a loving husband and stepfather who had been wrongly accused. She tried to cast doubt on the triplets' testimonies, suggesting they were influenced by their desire to see Brett punished. However, the overwhelming evidence made it difficult for her to build a strong defense. Throughout the trial, Valerie's family sat in the front row, visibly emotional. The triplets, now free from Brett's control, bravely testified about the abuse they had endured. Their courage moved everyone in the courtroom. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a verdict. On December 15, 2018, Brett Camden was found guilty of first-degree murder and multiple counts of abuse. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Brett showed little reaction as the verdict was read, maintaining his cold and distant demeanor. The sentencing brought a sense of relief to Valerie's family, but the pain of losing her was still raw. Valerie's sister, Susan, expressed mixed feelings outside the courthouse. "We're grateful for justice, but nothing will bring Valerie back. Our focus now is on helping the boys heal and move forward." The trial's conclusion marked the end of a dark chapter for Valerie's family and the beginning of their journey toward healing. The community rallied around them, offering support and solidarity in the aftermath of their ordeal. After the trial ended in December 2018, life slowly began to move forward for those involved in the Valerie Camden case. The Knoxville community, still shocked by the revelations, came together to support Valerie's triplets, Ethan, Nathan, and Alan. Local organizations, like the Knoxville Center for the Deaf, offered resources and counseling to help them heal. Ethan, the aspiring graphic designer, found solace in his art. He received support from the local art community and even had some of his work displayed at a gallery downtown. He began taking classes at the University of Tennessee, determined to build a future in graphic design despite the trauma he had endured. Nathan, the star athlete, returned to basketball. His teammates and coaches at his deaf school rallied around him, offering encouragement and support. He continued to excel on the court, using the sport as an outlet for his emotions. Nathan also received several college scholarship offers, giving him hope for a brighter future. Alan, the third triplet, focused on his studies. He was always the quietest of the three, but with the support of his friends and family, he began to come out of his shell. He joined a local support group for victims of abuse, where he found comfort in sharing his experiences with others who had faced similar situations. Detective Catherine Bernard, who had led the investigation, was commended for her dedication and thorough work on the case. The Knoxville Police Department recognized her with a special award, and she continued to serve the community with the same commitment and integrity. Brett Camden, now serving a life sentence without parole, had little to say about his conviction. Reports from the prison indicated that he remained isolated and unrepentant. His arrest and trial had stripped away the facade of respectability he had maintained for so long. Valerie's sister, Susan, took on a more active role in the triplets' lives. She became their legal guardian and worked tirelessly to provide a stable and loving home for them. The community's support helped her navigate the challenges of raising three traumatized teenagers. The case left a lasting impact on Knoxville, reminding everyone of the importance of vigilance and support for those in abusive situations. As the triplets began to rebuild their lives, they carried with them the memory of their mother and the hope for a better future. The case of Valerie Camden's murder is a haunting reminder of the hidden darkness that can lurk behind closed doors. Her strength and resilience continue to inspire those who knew her, while the justice served ensures that her tragic story will not be forgotten. Albert Rizzi, a respected and hardworking man, was at the center of this shocking crime. At the age of 49, Albert held the esteemed position of bank manager at a local financial institution. Known for his unwavering dedication to his job, he had earned the admiration and respect of both his colleagues and friends. Albert's integrity and reliability had made him a pillar of the community. However, beneath the facade of professional success, Albert struggled with insecurities in his personal life, particularly within his marriage to Diana Rizzi. Their relationship had been on shaky ground for months, with rumors circulating among their close-knit circle of friends. These rumors of infidelity whispered through the town, leaving a trail of broken trust in their wake. Despite the outward appearance of a happy marriage, whispers of tension and discontent filled the air. As we delve deeper into the life of Albert Rizzi, we uncover a man haunted by the demons of his own making. Friends recall his frequent visits to local bars, seeking solace in the bottom of a glass. The strain of his failing marriage and mounting work pressure weighed heavily on his shoulders, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. The summer of 1982 was a tumultuous time in Carmel, Indiana. The town was abuzz with excitement over the upcoming Carmel Fest, an annual event that brought the community together in celebration. Amidst the cheerful atmosphere, a dark cloud loomed over the Rizzi household, casting a shadow on their once idyllic life. The murder of Albert Rizzi would send shockwaves through the town, leaving everyone questioning who could have committed such a heinous act. The quiet town of Carmel, Indiana, known for its picturesque neighborhoods and tight-knit community, would now be thrust into the spotlight. The residents, once feeling safe and secure, were now gripped by fear and uncertainty. Join us as we unravel the twisted web of secrets and lies that led to the tragic demise of Albert Rizzi. Stay tuned. We will delve deeper into the investigation and the shocking revelations that emerged. The tranquility of Carmel, Indiana's suburban neighborhood was shattered on the sunny morning of June 2, 1982, when a shocking and horrifying discovery was made. It was a day that would forever be etched in the memories of those who lived there. As the morning sun cast its warm glow over the neatly manicured lawns and picturesque houses, a neighbor, whose name we shall withhold for privacy reasons, went about their daily routine. Little did they know that this seemingly ordinary day would soon take a chilling turn. As they made their way towards Albert Rizzi's residence, a sense of unease began to creep in. Something felt amiss. Their heart raced, and a knot formed in their stomach. Upon reaching the front door, they hesitated for a moment, sensing an inexplicable foreboding. Summoning their courage, they entered the house, their footsteps echoing through the silent hallway. The air was heavy with an eerie stillness, broken only by the distant hum of a radio playing a popular tune from that summer. The neighbors' eyes darted around, searching for any signs of life. And then they saw it. In the dimly lit bedroom, bathed in the soft morning light filtering through the curtains, lay Albert Rizzi's lifeless body. The scene that unfolded before their eyes was straight out of a nightmare. The neighbors' heart pounded in their chest, their breath caught in their throat. Fear and panic washed over them like a tidal wave. They stumbled back, their minds struggling to comprehend the gruesome sight that lay before them. With trembling hands, they reached for their landline and dialed 911, their voice quivering as they informed the authorities of the horrifying discovery. Within minutes, the tranquil neighborhood was transformed into a hive of activity. Police cars, their sirens blaring, descended upon the scene. Yellow crime scene tape crisscrossed the area, marking it as a place of tragedy. Neighbors gathered in hushed clusters, their faces etched with shock and disbelief. The authorities swiftly responded to the distressing call from the quiet suburban neighborhood in Carmel, Indiana, on that sunny morning of June 2, 1982. Led by seasoned investigators, Detective Intrit and Officer Namazoff, the police meticulously examined the crime scene where Albert Rizzi, a respected bank manager, had met his untimely demise. Upon entering the bedroom, the investigators were confronted with a haunting sight. The once pristine walls were now marred with splatters of blood, a chilling testament to the violence that had unfolded. The room itself seemed frozen in time, its atmosphere heavy with the weight of tragedy. Detective Intrit carefully surveyed the area, his experienced eyes honing in on every detail. He noted the position of the body, sprawled lifelessly on the floor, and the discarded gun nearby. The weapon, a .38 caliber revolver, had a distinct serial number etched onto its barrel. The detective made a mental note to cross-reference it with the local firearms database. Officer Namazov, armed with a camera, began meticulously documenting the scene. He captured close-up shots of the bloodstains on the walls, carefully noting their locations and patterns. Every angle was captured, ensuring that no crucial piece of evidence would be overlooked. The investigators knew the importance of thorough documentation in building a strong case. As the investigation progressed, the team discovered a few items of interest. A broken glass frame lay shattered on the floor, its remnants scattered around the room. Detective Intrit carefully collected the broken pieces, hoping to find fingerprints or other trace evidence. Nearby, a torn photograph caught Officer Namazov's attention. It depicted Albert and his wife Diana, smiling together at a local park. The torn edges suggested a possible struggle or argument. The investigators meticulously bagged and labeled each piece of evidence, ensuring a proper chain of custody. They knew that attention to detail was crucial, especially in a case that would undoubtedly attract media attention. The local newspapers, such as the Carmel Gazette, eagerly awaited updates on the investigation, and the police were determined to provide them with accurate information. The investigation had only just begun, and everyone knew that the road ahead would be filled with twists and turns. The investigation into the tragic murder of Albert Rizzi initially led to his wife, Diana Rizzi, as the prime suspect. Diana, a 43-year-old woman of elegance and sophistication, had long been dissatisfied with her marriage to Albert. Behind closed doors, she sought solace and excitement in the arms of her lover, Jason Mulholland. As police delved deeper into Diana's life, they discovered a web of deceit and betrayal. Her affair with Jason had been ongoing for months, unbeknownst to Albert. The clandestine meetings between Diana and Jason took place in various locations around Carmel, Indiana, adding an air of secrecy to their illicit relationship. During the course of the investigation, police uncovered a series of sexually explicit love letters exchanged between Diana and Jason. These letters, filled with graphic details of sex acts and promises of a future together, shed light on the depth of their affair. They also found evidence of expensive gifts exchanged between the two lovers, including a gold necklace from Tiffany & Company, a popular jewelry store in June of 1982. When confronted with the evidence, Diana initially denied any involvement in her husband's murder. However, under the relentless questioning of the police, she eventually broke down and confessed to her role in the affair. She admitted to hating Albert, driven by her desire to be free from the constraints of her marriage, but not to the murder. Diana's confession of hatred and forbidden love sent shockwaves through the community as the once respected wife and mother was revealed to be a cold-blooded adulteress. The media frenzy surrounding the case intensified, with headlines in local newspapers such as "Love Gone Wrong," "The Carmel Murder Scandal," and "Betrayal and Bloodshed." The dark side of suburbia. Our second suspect in the murder of Albert Rizzi was Jason Mulholland, a 21-year-old student at Ball State University. Jason, a charismatic young man with a penchant for adventure, found himself entangled in a web of love, deceit, and greed. Born and raised in the confining and very Midwestern surroundings of Muncie, Indiana, Jason was no stranger to the allure of the big city. He yearned for a life beyond the confines of his small-town upbringing, dreaming of fast cars, designer clothes, and the glamorous lifestyle he believed he deserved. It was this desire for wealth and luxury that drew him to Diana Rizzi, Albert's wife. Diana, a sophisticated and elegant woman, seemed to embody everything Jason desired. Her refined taste and impeccable style captivated him, and he saw in her an opportunity to escape the ordinary. Their clandestine affair provided a thrilling escape from the monotony of Jason's college life, a taste of the high society he craved. But as the investigation unfolded, the police began to uncover a darker side to Jason's involvement. Financial gain appeared to be a motivating factor in the murder of Albert Rizzi. The authorities discovered a series of incriminating messages exchanged between Jason and Diana, discussing their plans to inherit Albert's substantial fortune. As the police subjected Jason to intense interrogation, his facade of innocence began to crumble. During the interrogation, Jason's demeanor shifted from confident to nervous. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as he struggled to maintain his composure. His voice trembled as he attempted to explain his involvement, each word laced with desperation. "I never intended for things to go this far," Jason confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was blinded by my own desires, and I let greed consume me. But I never wanted anyone to get hurt." The investigators pressed further, seeking to uncover the full extent of Jason's role in the murder. As they delved deeper into his background, they discovered a troubling pattern of reckless behavior and a disregard for the consequences of his actions. With mounting evidence against him, Jason's fate hung in the balance. As the investigation continued, the truth behind Albert Rizzi's murder slowly came to light. The police meticulously pieced together the puzzle, connecting the dots that would ultimately lead to justice. In the investigation into the murder of Albert Rizzi, the Carmel Police Department uncovered a significant breakthrough. On the morning of June 15, 1982, at approximately 9:30 a.m., Officer Roger Kraftwerk was conducting a routine search of the wooded area near the crime scene when he stumbled upon a discarded shoebox hidden beneath a dense thicket of bushes. The shoebox, weathered and worn, contained a trove of valuable evidence that could potentially shed light on the identity of the perpetrator. Inside, investigators found a series of handwritten letters, photographs, and a small, blood-stained diary. The contents of these items, meticulously preserved within the box, have opened up new avenues of inquiry for the dedicated detectives working tirelessly to solve this baffling case. The letters, addressed to an individual known only as A.R., appear to be written by someone deeply familiar with Albert Rizzi's personal life. The author's words, filled with a chilling mix of love and resentment, hint at a long-standing grudge and a desire for revenge. The photographs, capturing candid moments from Albert's life, provide a haunting glimpse into the past. Among them, a picture of Albert and his wife Diana, smiling together on their wedding day, now takes on a more sinister meaning. The blood-stained diary, belonging to Albert himself, contained cryptic entries that speak of a growing paranoia and fear. The final entry, dated just days before his untimely demise, mentions an encounter with an unknown individual who threatened to expose a dark secret from Albert's past. Could this revelation be connected to his murder? The third suspect in the murder of Albert Rizzi was Carolina Coco Keeling, a 65-year-old neighbor residing in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Carmel, Indiana. Coco, known for her friendly demeanor and nosy nature, prided herself on being well-informed about the happenings in the community. However, behind her seemingly pleasant facade, Coco concealed a secret addiction to cocaine and a deep-seated jealousy towards the seemingly perfect marriage of Diana and Albert. As the police delved deeper into the investigation, suspicions arose regarding Coco's potential involvement in the heinous crime. Her close proximity to the Rizzi residence and her knowledge of the neighborhood's inner workings made her a person of interest. The police sought to uncover any hidden motives or connections between Coco and the victim. During the intense interrogation, Coco's demeanor shifted from friendly neighbor to a woman on edge. Her eyes darted nervously as she answered the investigators' questions. She claimed to have no knowledge of the events leading to Albert's murder, expressing shock and disbelief at the news of his untimely demise. However, the investigators were not easily swayed. They probed deeper, presenting Coco with evidence that contradicted her initial claims of innocence. They discovered that Coco had been seen in the vicinity of the Rizzi residence on the morning of June 2nd, the day Albert's lifeless body was discovered. Witnesses reported seeing Coco acting suspiciously, her usually friendly demeanor replaced with an air of unease. Furthermore, the police uncovered a series of phone calls between Coco and Diana in the days leading up to the murder. The content of these calls raised eyebrows, as they involved discussions about Albert's financial affairs and the possibility of a life insurance policy. The investigators suspected that Coco, driven by her addiction and jealousy, may have been entangled in a sinister plot to eliminate Albert for personal gain. As the interrogation intensified, Coco's initial denials began to crumble. She broke down, confessing to her involvement in the murder. Coco revealed that she had been manipulated by someone in the Rizzi family who promised her a share of the life insurance payout in exchange for her assistance. Overwhelmed by her addiction and fueled by envy, Coco succumbed to the cunning plan. The investigators, armed with this newfound information, were one step closer to unraveling the truth behind Albert Rizzi's murder. Their relentless pursuit of justice had led them down a twisted path where the veneer of suburban tranquility had been shattered by greed, addiction, and betrayal. In a shocking turn of events, the true identity of Albert Rizzi's murderer was uncovered by the diligent work of the police. It was none other than his own wife, Diana Rizzi, who emerged as the accused killer. The motive behind this heinous act was driven by a desire for freedom, passion, and financial security, all provided by Albert's life insurance policy. However, the truth took an even more sinister twist when it was revealed that Diana's own 16-year-old daughter, Skye Rizzi, was labeled as the actual mastermind behind the murder. Motivated by deep-seated feelings of neglect and resentment, Skye orchestrated her father's demise by psychologically manipulating her mother and her mother's lover, Jason Mulholland, a 21-year-old student at Ball State. Throughout the investigation, the police meticulously collected evidence, leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice. They discovered a trail of incriminating phone calls exchanged between Skye, Diana, and Jason, detailing their sinister intentions. Additionally, surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store captured the pair purchasing the murder weapon, a gun, just days before the crime took place. The police investigation uncovered a web of deceit and betrayal that had been carefully woven by this trio. Diana's and Jason's arrest left the community in a state of disbelief, as they struggled to comprehend how a seemingly devoted wife and mother could be capable of such a heinous act. The shockwaves reverberated through the quiet suburban neighborhood of Carmel, Indiana, where the Rizzi family had once resided. In the aftermath of this shocking revelation, the community of Carmel, Indiana, was left to heal and rebuild. The wounds inflicted by this tragic event would take time to mend, as the echoes of this true crime case would forever resonate within the hearts and minds of those who were touched by it. In the summer of 1982, the small town of Carmel, Indiana became the epicenter of a gripping murder trial that captivated the state of Indiana. The courtroom, adorned with its polished oak panels and imposing judge's bench, was transformed into a stage where justice would ultimately prevail. The prosecution, led by the tenacious district attorney, Eric Swift, presented a compelling case against Diana Rizzi, the accused murderer. With meticulous attention to detail, Eric Swift meticulously pieced together the evidence, revealing the depth of Diana's betrayal. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as he painted a vivid picture of her motive, a desire for freedom, passion, and financial security provided by her husband Albert's life insurance policy. The defense, represented by the seasoned attorney Elizabeth Holmes Narwhal, fought tooth and nail to establish doubt in the minds of the jury. Holmes Narwhal skillfully questioned the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses, highlighting inconsistencies in their testimonies. She argued that the evidence was circumstantial at best, and that Diana was being unfairly scapegoated for a crime she did not commit. As the trial progressed, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Witnesses took the stand, recounting their interactions with Diana, Skye, and Jason. The jury listened intently, their eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. The media, hungry for sensational stories, filled the courtroom benches, their pens scribbling furiously as they captured every twist and turn. After days of riveting testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. The nation held its breath as they weighed the evidence and deliberated on Diana's fate. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the jury returned with their verdict. Diana Rizzi was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers as the reality of the verdict sank in. Diana's face remained stoic, betraying no emotion. The judge, his voice filled with authority, pronounced the sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As the media frenzy subsided and the town slowly returned to its normal rhythm, Riverton was left to pick up the pieces. The impact of the trial reverberated through the community, forever altering the lives of those involved. Following the conclusion of the highly publicized trial, the lives of those involved were forever changed. Carolina Coco Keeling, the nosy neighbor who had harbored deep-seated jealousy towards the Rizzi family, found herself ostracized by the community. The revelation of her secret addiction to cocaine only intensified the disdain towards her. The local newspaper, the Indianapolis Gazette, ran a scathing expose on Coco's double life, further tarnishing her already damaged reputation. She retreated from public view, seeking solace in the anonymity of her small apartment. Sky Rizzi, the 15-year-old daughter of the victim and the accused mastermind, faced a long and arduous road to redemption. Plagued by feelings of neglect and resentment, her involvement in her father's murder shocked the community to its core. The media frenzy surrounding the trial painted Sky as a troubled and misguided teenager. The local television station, Wish TV, aired a special report on the impact of the trial on Sky's life, delving into her troubled life and the psychological factors that led to her involvement in the crime. There were even rumors she would be played by Drew Barrymore in a made-for-TV movie. Sky was placed in a juvenile detention center where she underwent intensive therapy and counseling in an attempt to rehabilitate her. Jason Mulholland, the young lover of Diana Rizzi, faced a bleak future. His dreams of a luxurious lifestyle were shattered as he found himself behind bars. The local radio station, WFBQ-FM, covered Jason's sentencing, highlighting the role he played in the heinous crime. With his youthful charm now overshadowed by his criminal actions, Jason struggled to come to terms with the consequences of his choices. The loss of Albert Rizzi, a beloved member of the community, left a void that could never be filled. The local church, St. John's Episcopal Church, held a memorial service to honor Albert's memory, providing solace to his grieving family and friends. The community rallied around the Rizzi family, offering support and condolences during their time of need. As the months passed, the small town of Carmel, Indiana returned to its usual rhythm, but the scars of the tragedy remained. The impact of the events that unfolded in June of 1982 continued to reverberate through the lives of those involved, forever altering their paths. And so, the story of Albert Rizzi's murder comes to an end. In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Carmel, Indiana, the dark underbelly of seemingly idyllic lives was exposed. Love, betrayal, and a shocking twist left an indelible mark on all those involved. Michael Marshall Tucker was a 47-year-old man who lived in Pacifica, California. He worked as a software engineer, which means he made programs for computers. He was really good at his job and came up with many new ideas. Marshall was known for working hard and always trying his best. Marshall had a happy family. He was married to Lainey, and they had 2 children. Activia was 14 years old, and Marlboro was 10 years old. The family lived in a nice house near the beach. Marshall loved his family very much and always spent time with them. He often took them hiking on the weekends. They went to places like Maury Point and the Sweeney Ridge Trail. Marshall liked taking pictures of nature, especially the ocean and sunsets. He had a camera and always carried it with him on hikes. Marshall went to Stanford University, where he met his best friend, Nate Harrison. Nate and Marshall stayed close friends even after college. They both worked at the same tech company, which made computer programs for big businesses. In his free time, Marshall liked to read books about technology and science. He also liked watching shows like The X-Files and Star Trek Voyager with his kids. People who knew Marshall said he was kind and helpful. His friends and co-workers admired him for being smart and caring. He always had a smile on his face and was ready to help anyone in need. At work, he was excited about a new project that he thought would change how people use computers. Marshall and his team were working on this project, hoping to present it to the company leaders soon. In the days before his death, Marshall was busy but happy. He talked about the family hiking trip they had planned for the weekend. They were going to visit Point Reyes National Seashore. Marshall was also helping Activia with her science project about marine life. He spent time with Marlboro building a model rocket. Marshall was looking forward to many things. He dreamed of one day starting his own tech company. He also wanted to travel with his family to places like Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Canyon. Marshall Tucker was a good man with big dreams and a loving family. His sudden and tragic death left a huge hole in the lives of those who loved him. On March 23, 2003, the weather in Pacifica, California, was cloudy and cool. At about 8 o'clock a.m., Activia Tucker, Marshall's 14-year-old daughter, woke up and went downstairs to the living room. She was expecting to see her dad getting ready for their planned hike. Instead, she found a terrifying scene that would change her life forever. The living room was a mess. Furniture was turned over, and things were scattered everywhere. In the middle of the room, Activia saw her father, Marshall, lying on the floor. There was blood around his head, and he wasn't moving. Activia screamed and called out for her mother, Lainey. Lainey Tucker rushed into the room. She saw Marshall and immediately ran to the phone to call 911. Her hands were shaking, and her voice was trembling as she told the operator what had happened. She said it looked like someone had broken into their house and hurt her husband. The police arrived quickly. Officers were on the scene within 10 minutes. Officer Mark Stevens was the first to enter the house. He found Lainey crying and holding Activia, who was still in shock. Stevens asked them to step outside while he checked the rest of the house. Officer Stevens noticed the living room blip like someone had tried to make it appear as if a robbery had occurred, but there were too many things that didn't add up. Valuable items, like the TV and Lainey's jewelry, were left untouched. Marshall's body was lying near the fireplace. Next to him was a heavy ornate candlestick that was covered in blood. It was clear that this was the weapon used to kill him. The detectives began their work, taking pictures of the scene and collecting evidence. They dusted for fingerprints and looked for any clues that might tell them who had done this. Outside, Lainey and Activia were talking to each other. Lainey was trying to stay calm for her daughter, but it was clear that she was devastated. Activia was crying and kept asking why someone would hurt her dad. The discovery of Marshall Tucker's body was the start of a complicated and tragic investigation. The peaceful life of the Tucker family was shattered, and the search for the truth had just begun. When the police arrived at the Tucker home on March 23, 2003, they quickly secured the scene. The lead investigators, Detectives Laura Grant and Michael Chua, both experienced and respected, began their work. Detective Grant was 45 years old, with short brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude. Detective Chua, 50, was tall and lean, known for his sharp intuition. The living room was a chaotic scene. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and items were scattered all over the floor. It looked like someone had tried to make it seem like a robbery. However, some valuable items were left untouched, which made the detectives suspicious. A flat-screen TV, Lainey's expensive jewelry, and a new laptop were still in place. Marshall's body was found near the fireplace. His head was badly injured, and there was blood on an ornate candlestick nearby. The candlestick, a heavy piece from their mantel, was clearly the murder weapon. Marshall's wounds showed he had been hit multiple times, indicating a violent struggle. Detective Grant and Detective Chua started their investigation by looking closely at the crime scene. They took photos and collected evidence. They also dusted for fingerprints on the candlestick and other surfaces. Forensic experts arrived to help, wearing white suits to avoid contaminating the scene. They collected blood samples and fibers that might provide clues. The detectives interviewed Lainey and Olivia outside the house. Lainey, still in shock, tried to explain what had happened. She said she had been asleep and didn't hear anything unusual. Olivia, who found her father, was too shaken to speak much. Officer Mark Stevens, who was the first to arrive, helped keep them calm and took their initial statements. Detective Grant noted that there were no signs of forced entry. The door was intact and the windows were not broken. This suggested that the killer either had a key or was let in by someone inside. This made the detectives think that the killer might be someone Marshall knew. The police used special lights to look for hidden evidence, like footprints or blood traces. They also used a device to check for any recent calls or messages on Marshall's and Lainey's phones. They hoped this could lead them to more clues about what happened. The investigation team worked through the day, piecing together what they could from the chaotic scene. They collected all the evidence carefully, knowing that each piece might be crucial to solving the case. Marshall Tucker's murder was a shocking and tragic event in the peaceful town of Pacifica. The detectives knew they had a tough job ahead to uncover the truth and bring justice to Marshall and his grieving family. Lainey Tucker, Marshall's wife, was the first suspect. Lainey was 41 years old, a creative and quiet person. She loved writing adult fiction, especially stories with violent and intense themes. Over the past year, Lainey became deeply involved in a fantasy world she created. Her latest story was about a twisted love affair, and her friends noticed that she started mixing up her fantasy with real life. The police found Lainey's behavior odd. She seemed distant and sometimes confused about what was real. Detective Grant and Detective Chua brought her in for questioning the day after Marshall was found. They asked her about her relationship with Marshall and what she was doing the night of the murder. Lainey told them she had been asleep and didn't hear anything. She said she loved Marshall and couldn't understand why someone would want to hurt him. The detectives noticed that she seemed nervous, often fidgeting and avoiding eye contact. They asked her about her writing and if she ever felt like her stories affected her real life. Laney insisted that her writing was just a hobby and had nothing to do with Marshall's death. The detectives also looked into Laney's recent activities. They found out that she had been acting strangely at her writing group meetings. Her friends said she talked a lot about her story and seemed obsessed with the idea of a dramatic and tragic love. Some of them even wondered if she was getting too involved in her fiction. During the interrogation, Laney's answers were often vague. She didn't have a clear alibi for the night of the murders, saying only that she had taken some sleeping pills and gone to bed early. The detectives asked if anyone else had a key to their house. Laney said only she and Marshall had keys, which made them even more suspicious. The detectives also checked Laney's phone records. They found several text messages and emails that showed her growing obsession with her story. One message to a friend said, "Sometimes I feel like my characters are more real than my own life." This made the detectives think that Laney might have blurred the lines between her fantasy and reality. Laney's reaction to the interrogation was mostly calm, but she seemed tired and stressed. The detectives couldn't tell that she was hiding something or just overwhelmed by the situation. They decided to keep an eye on her while they continued their investigation, looking for more clues that could either prove her guilt or clear her name. Laney Tucker's behavior and her intense connection to her fictional world made her a prime suspect in Marshall's murder, but the detectives needed more evidence to know for sure if she was responsible. Nate Harrison, Marshall's best friend, was the second suspect. Nate was 39 years old and worked with Marshall at the same tech company. He was outgoing, friendly, and known for his easygoing nature. Nate often visited the Tucker household and was considered part of the family. He shared Marshall's passion for technology and innovation, and they had been close friends since their days at Stanford University. Detective Grant and Detective Chua brought Nate in for questioning. They wanted to understand his relationship with Marshall and Laney better. Nate seemed surprised by the suspicion but cooperated fully with the police. He told them about his long friendship with Marshall and how they worked together on many projects. Nate explained that he had been at home the night of the murder working on a new software project. He provided the detectives with the name of a colleague who could confirm he had been online, working late into the night. Nate seemed genuinely upset about Marshall's death and couldn't believe that someone would kill his best friend. The detectives asked Nate about his relationship with Laney. He admitted that he and Laney had become closer over the past year, especially as she struggled with her writing and mental health. Nate said he often tried to support her and keep her grounded when she got too involved in her fictional world. When asked if he had any romantic feelings for Laney, Nate hesitated but then confessed that he did have feelings for her. He quickly added that he never acted on them and that his loyalty was always to Marshall. The detectives found this interesting and wondered if Nate's feelings for Laney could be a motive. The detectives also checked Nate's phone records and computer activity. They found that Nate had sent many messages to Laney, encouraging her writing and offering emotional support. There was nothing directly suspicious in the messages, but the frequency of their communication raised some questions. Nate's demeanor during the interrogation was mostly calm, but he appeared anxious at times, especially when discussing Laney. He seemed genuinely hurt by the loss of his friend and worried about Laney's well-being. The detectives could not determine if his anxiety was due to grief or something more. Nate's strong friendship with Marshall and his unspoken love for Laney made him a complicated figure in the investigation. The detectives needed more evidence to determine if Nate's feelings had anything to do with Marshall's murder, or if he was simply a supportive friend caught in a tragic situation. Nate Harrison's deep connection to both Marshall and Laney made him an important part of the investigation, and the detectives continued to probe for more details that could clarify his role in the unfolding mystery. On March 27, 2003, 4 days after Marshall Tucker's murder, the weather in Pacifica, California, was rainy and cold. Detective Grant and Detective Chua were at the police station when they received a call about new evidence. An officer had found something unusual while going through Laney's phone records and computer files. The new evidence was a series of emails and text messages between Laney and Nate. These messages were different from the ones the detectives had seen before. They were more personal and hinted at something troubling. In one message, Laney wrote to Nate, "I can't stop thinking about my story. It feels so real. Sometimes I wonder if the only way to end it is to make it real." The detectives felt a chill reading the message. It seemed like Laney was losing her grip on reality. Another message from Nate to Laney said, "If this is what you think has to happen, I'm here for you. Just be careful." This message made the detectives suspect that Nate might have known about Laney's plan to kill Marshall. Detective Grant and Detective Chua quickly went to Laney's house to talk to her again. Laney was cooperative but looked tired and stressed. The detectives showed her the messages and asked what they meant. Laney broke down in tears and said she didn't know what was real anymore. She said that she had been so wrapped up in her fantasy world that she felt like it was taking over her life. While Laney was talking, Detective Chua received a call from the forensic team. They had found traces of Nate's fingerprints on the candlestick, the murder weapon. This new evidence was crucial. It showed that Nate had been in the house and touched the weapon. The detectives went to Nate's house to confront him. It was still raining heavily, making the scene feel even more intense. Nate was shocked to see the detectives but let them in. They showed him the messages and told him about the fingerprints. Nate tried to explain that he had been at the Tucker house many times and could have touched the candlestick before, but the detectives didn't believe him. Detective Grant and Detective Chua arrested Nate on suspicion of being involved in Marshall's murder. Nate protested, saying he was only trying to help Laney, but the evidence was strong against him. The new evidence changed the direction of the investigation. The detectives now believed that both Laney and Nate were involved in Marshall's death. They continued to dig deeper, looking for more clues to piece together the full story. The discovery of the messages and fingerprints brought new light to the case, making it clear that the investigation was far from over. The detectives were determined to find the truth and bring justice for Marshall Tucker. Anna Louise Reed was the third suspect. Anna Louise was 24 years old and lived next door to the Tucker family. She was a social worker known for her compassion and protective nature. She often spent time with Laney, offering support during difficult times. Rumors of a romantic relationship between Anna Louise and Laney added a layer of complexity to the investigation. Detective Grant and Detective Chua decided to bring Anna Louise in for questioning. She seemed surprised but agreed to cooperate. Anna Louise described her friendship with Laney and how she often tried to help her through her emotional struggles. She admitted they were very close but denied any romantic involvement. Anna Louise told the detectives she had been at home the night of the murder, reading a book and watching TV. She said she heard nothing unusual and didn't know anything about Marshall's death until Laney called her the next morning. The detectives checked her alibi, looking for any inconsistencies. During the interrogation, Anna Louise appeared calm and composed. She answered all the questions without hesitation. However, the detectives noticed she seemed particularly concerned about Laney's well-being. When asked about Laney's mental state, Anna Louise said Laney had been struggling with reality and often got lost in her fictional world. The detectives asked Anna Louise if she knew about Laney's plans to kill Marshall. She denied knowing anything and said she would have tried to stop her if she did. The detectives found it hard to believe that someone as close to Laney as Anna Louise wouldn't have noticed something was wrong. The detectives also checked Anna Louise's phone records. They found numerous text messages between her and Laney. Most messages were about everyday things, but some hinted at Laney's emotional turmoil. In one message, Laney wrote, "Sometimes I feel like my stories are more real than my life." Anna Louise replied, "You need to focus on reality. I'm here for you." Detective Grant and Detective Chua continued to question Anna Louise, trying to find any clue that might link her to the crime. They asked about her relationship with Marshall and if she ever felt jealous of him. Anna Louise said she respected Marshall and would never do anything to harm him. Despite Anna Louise's calm demeanor and seemingly solid alibi, the detectives were not entirely convinced of her innocence. They believed she might know more than she was letting on. They decided to keep a close eye on her while they continued their investigation. Anna Louise Reed's involvement in the Tucker family's lives and her close relationship with Laney made her a key figure in the case. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to determine her role, if any, in Marshall's murder. On March 30, 2003, a week after Marshall Tucker's murder, the weather was clear and cool in Pacifica, California. Detectives Grant and Chua received a crucial tip from the forensic team. They discovered a series of incriminating messages on Laney's phone that linked Nate Harrison directly to the crime. These messages showed Nate's encouragement and guidance, proving he knew about Laney's plan to kill Marshall. Laney Tucker, 41, was the murderer. She had become obsessed with a twisted fantasy world she created, believing that Marshall's death was necessary to immortalize their love story. Laney's mental state had deteriorated to the point where she couldn't distinguish between fiction and reality. Her obsession with her violent stories drove her to bludgeon Marshall with an ornate candlestick from their living room. Detectives Grant and Chua realized that Nate Harrison, 39, was not just an innocent bystander. Nate had harbored secret feelings for Laney, and instead of preventing the murder, he manipulated the situation to make sure it happened. Nate believed that with Marshall out of the way, he could finally be with Laney. He provided Laney with the means to carry out the murder and helped her stage the burglary scene. The detectives reviewed the evidence and planned their approach. On the evening of March 30, they drove to Nate's house. The sky was clear, and the air was crisp. They knocked on Nate's door, and he answered, looking surprised to see them. Detective Grant told him they needed to talk about new evidence in the case. Inside, they showed Nate the messages and explained what they had found. Nate's face turned pale, and he tried to deny everything, but the evidence was too strong. Detective Chua calmly placed Nate under arrest for his involvement in Marshall's murder. Nate looked shocked and defeated as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Laney was also arrested at her home. She didn't resist and seemed almost relieved. When the detectives told her they knew the full story, she broke down, admitting that she believed Marshall's death was a tragic necessity for their love story. Marshall's family was devastated by the news of Laney and Nate's betrayal. They couldn't understand how the people closest to Marshall could do such a thing. The arrest of Laney and Nate brought a mix of grief and relief. They were heartbroken over the loss of Marshall, but relieved that justice would be served. The clear skies of March 30, 2003, marked a turning point in the case. The detectives had solved the mystery, bringing closure to Marshall Tucker's family and the community of Pacifica. The trial of Laney Tucker and May Harrison began on June 15, 2003, in the Pacifica Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters from local news stations like KTVU and the Pacifica Tribune. The public was eager to see justice served for the murder of Marshall Tucker. The prosecutor, Samantha Klein, 45, was known for her tough and determined nature. She presented a strong case against Laney and Nate, showing the jury the incriminating messages and evidence from the crime scene. Klein argued that Laney's delusional fantasy had led her to murder her husband, and that Nate had manipulated her to fulfill his own selfish desires. On the defense side was Robert Hayes, 50, a seasoned attorney known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind. He argued that Laney was mentally unstable and couldn't fully comprehend her actions. Hayes claimed that Nate's involvement was merely that of a misguided friend trying to help. He emphasized that Nate never directly participated in the murder. During the trial, the victim's family watched with heavy hearts. Marshall's parents, siblings, and children were present every day, hoping for justice. They listened intently as witnesses testified about Laney's erratic behavior and Nate's secret love for her. The emotional toll was evident as they struggled with the betrayal by people they had trusted. After weeks of testimony and arguments, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On July 1, 2003, they reached a verdict. Laney Tucker was found guilty of first-degree murder. Nate Harrison was found guilty of being an accessory to murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdicts were read. Judge Evelyn Carter, 55, delivered the sentences. Laney was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nate received a 25-year sentence for his role in the crime. Both sentences reflected the severity of their actions and the impact on Marshall's family. The sentencing brought mixed feelings among the victim's family and friends. While they were relieved that Laney and Nate were held accountable, the harsh reality of losing Marshall forever weighed heavily on them. They felt a sense of justice, but the pain of their loss remained. The trial and sentencing had a significant impact on the community of Pacifica. People discussed the case in cafes and on local radio stations like KGO. It served as a grim reminder of how quickly life could change and the importance of mental health awareness. The story of Marshall Tucker's murder and the subsequent trial left a lasting impression on everyone involved. It was a tragic tale of love, betrayal, and the search for justice in a quiet coastal town. After the trial, the community of Pacifica tried to return to normal. The events have left a deep scar, but people were determined to move forward. The Tucker family, especially, faced the challenge of rebuilding their lives without Marshall. Laney Tucker, now serving her life sentence, was transferred to the California Institution for Women. She received psychiatric treatment for her mental health issues. Laney spent her days writing and attending therapy sessions. She expressed remorse for her actions but knew she would never be able to undo the damage she had caused. Nate Harrison, sentenced to 25 years, was incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison. He struggled with guilt and regret, understanding the gravity of his manipulation. Nate's family distanced themselves from him, Unable to comprehend his actions, it used his time in prison to reflect on his mistakes, participating in rehabilitation programs and counseling. The community of Pacifica held a memorial for Marshall Tucker every year on the anniversary of his death. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered to remember him and celebrate his life. The memorial became a symbol of the town's resilience and unity. Life in Pacifica slowly returned to normal, but the memory of Marshall Tucker and the lessons from his tragic death remained. The community, united by their shared grief, became stronger and more supportive of one another, determined to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. It was a warm evening on June 29, 2019, in Old Saybrook, Connecticut. The summer sun had just set, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. At around 8:30 p.m., Josh Parker, a 33-year-old software engineer, made a frantic call to the Old Saybrook Police Department. He had just found his wife, Vanessa Parker, dead in their master bedroom. Josh had been out running errands that evening. He went to Stop and Shop to pick up groceries and then swung by Starbucks for a coffee. When he returned home, he noticed that the house was unusually quiet. Calling out for Vanessa, he received no response. Concerned, he walked up the stairs to their bedroom, where he discovered the horrifying scene. Vanessa, a 32-year-old event planner, was lying on the floor, her wedding veil wrapped tightly around her neck. The room was a mess, with furniture overturned and personal items scattered everywhere, showing signs of a struggle. Josh immediately dialed 911, his voice trembling as he described the situation. When the dispatcher asked Josh to check for a pulse, he complied, but it was clear Vanessa was gone. His shock turned to despair as he sat on the floor beside her, waiting for the police to arrive. He was visibly shaken, his hands trembling and his face pale. Despite the trauma, he managed to stay on the line with the dispatcher, answering questions and providing as much information as he could. Within minutes, the Old Saybrook police arrived at the scene. Officers secured the area and took charge of the investigation. Neighbors gathered outside, their faces reflecting a mix of shock and curiosity. A usually serene neighborhood was now buzzing with activity as news of the incident spread. Local media, including the Hartford Courant and Channel 3 Eyewitness News, arrived on the scene, capturing footage of the police activity and interviewing neighbors who expressed their disbelief over the tragedy. The discovery of Vanessa Parker's body marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would uncover shocking secrets and lead to a devastating conclusion. As the night wore on, the police worked diligently to gather evidence and piece together the events that led to Vanessa's untimely death. Vanessa Parker was 32 years old at the time of her death. She was an event planner in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, known for her demanding and perfectionist nature. Friends and family had nicknamed her Bridezilla in the months before her wedding. Vanessa lived with her husband, Josh Parker, in a cozy house on Main Street. They had recently spent $100,000 on their lavish wedding, which took place at the historic Saybrook Point Inn, a popular venue for such grand events. Vanessa was ambitious and meticulous in her work and quickly made a name for herself in the event planning industry. She was the go-to person for organizing upscale weddings and corporate events in the area. Her clients included high-profile companies and wealthy families who admired her dedication and attention to detail. Despite her demanding personality, Vanessa had a close group of friends who respected her drive. Her best friend, Jessica Moore, was always by her side. Jessica, a marketing manager, had been Vanessa's confidant since their college days. They often met at the local cafe at Ashlawn Farm Coffee to discuss work and life over a cup of their favorite brew. In the days leading up to her death, Vanessa was busy finalizing details for an upcoming corporate event. She had spent hours working on seating arrangements and floral designs, determined to make everything perfect. Despite the stress, Vanessa had big dreams. She wanted to expand her business, possibly opening a second office in New York City. She envisioned herself as a leading figure in the event planning world, admired for her creativity and professionalism. Vanessa's life seemed perfect on the outside, but she carried a burden of secrets. Her demanding nature and high standards often put a strain on her relationships. The discovery of her body marked the tragic end of a life filled with ambition and dreams, leaving her family and friends in shock and grief. The Old Saybrook police arrived at the Parker residence within minutes of Josh's frantic 911 call on June 29, 2019. The team was led by Detective Sarah Collins, a seasoned investigator with 15 years of experience. Detective Collins, known for her thorough and methodical approach, quickly took control of the scene. As the officers entered the master bedroom, they were met with a chaotic and disturbing sight. The room was in complete disarray, with furniture overturned and personal items scattered across the floor. Vanessa Parker's body lay on the floor, her wedding veil tightly wrapped around her neck. The scene suggested a violent struggle had taken place. Detective Collins noted the presence of broken glass, likely from a shattered lamp, and bloodstains on the carpet, adding to the grim tableau. The initial assessment pointed to a crime of passion. Vanessa's death appeared to be the result of strangulation, a brutal and personal method of murder. The use of her own wedding veil as the murder weapon added a chilling element to the crime, indicating a deep emotional connection between the victim and the perpetrator. Detective Collins and her team began their meticulous investigation. They documented the scene with photographs and sketches, ensuring every detail was captured. They collected fingerprints from various surfaces, hoping to find matches that could identify the killer. Fibers and hair samples were also gathered, providing additional forensic evidence that might link the suspect to the crime scene. The police used luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains, illuminating areas that had been cleaned in an attempt to cover up the crime. They also utilized advanced tools like 3D scanners to create a detailed digital model of the room, allowing them to analyze the positions and movements during the struggle. Detective Collins interviewed Josh Parker, who was visibly shaken and cooperative. He provided an alibi for his whereabouts earlier in the evening, claiming he had been running errands. Despite his calm demeanor, the detectives kept him under close scrutiny, aware that spouses are often primary suspects in such cases. Neighbors were also interviewed, with officers canvassing the area to gather any information about unusual activities or suspicious individuals. The local community was in shock, and the media, including the Hartford Courant and Channel 3 Eyewitness News, reported on the tragic event, increasing pressure on the police to solve the case quickly. As the investigation progressed, Detective Collins and her team remained focused and determined, knowing that solving Vanessa Parker's murder required piecing together every bit of evidence and uncovering the hidden truths behind her tragic death. Josh Parker, Vanessa's husband, was the first person the police investigated. At 33 years old, Josh worked as a software engineer. He was known for his calm and composed nature, which often complemented Vanessa's demanding personality. However, the pressure of their lavish $100,000 wedding had taken a toll on him. Friends mentioned that Josh had been more stressed lately, trying to keep up with Vanessa's high expectations and the financial strain. The police brought Josh in for questioning on June 30, 2019, the day after Vanessa's body was found. Detective Sarah Collins led the interrogation. Josh appeared tired and distraught, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Despite his exhaustion, he maintained a cooperative attitude. He recounted his activities on the evening of June 29th, explaining that he had been running errands, including stops at Stop and Shop and Starbucks, before returning home to find Vanessa. During the questioning, Detective Collins noticed Josh's hands were trembling slightly, a sign of his nervousness. He described his relationship with Vanessa as loving but admitted that her demanding nature had been challenging. He mentioned the strain of planning their expensive wedding and the arguments they had about money. Josh's demeanor remained mostly calm, but there were moments when his voice wavered, revealing the depth of his emotional turmoil. The police asked Josh about his whereabouts during the estimated time of Vanessa's death. He provided detailed accounts of his activities, including receipts from the grocery store and the coffee shop to support his alibi. Despite his cooperative behavior, Detective Collins and her team knew they needed to verify every detail. They collected Josh's fingerprints and took a DNA sample to compare with the evidence found at the crime scene. Friends and family described Josh as a patient and understanding person. He was known for his supportive nature, often going out of his way to help Vanessa with her event planning business. However, the financial burden of their wedding and Vanessa's high expectations had pushed him to his limits. Detective Collins continued to probe, looking for any inconsistencies in Josh's story. They asked him about any recent arguments or conflicts with Vanessa, to which he admitted they had fought about money and the wedding expenses. Despite the tension, he insisted that he would never harm Vanessa. As the investigation progressed, the police kept a close eye on Josh. His cooperative attitude and detailed alibi were crucial, but Detective Collins knew that uncovering the truth required thorough and meticulous work. They needed to explore every lead to ensure they did not overlook any crucial evidence. Jessica Moore, Vanessa's best friend and maid of honor, was the next person the police investigated. Jessica was 31 years old and worked as a marketing manager. Known for her cheerful and supportive demeanor, she was a loyal friend to Vanessa despite her demanding nature. Jessica and Vanessa had been inseparable since their college days at the University of Connecticut, where they both majored in business. On June 30, 2019, Detective Sarah Collins and her team brought Jessica in for questioning. Jessica appeared visibly shaken, her eyes red from crying. She described her relationship with Vanessa as close and supportive. They often met at Ashlawn Farm Coffee to catch up and discuss their lives. Jessica recounted the days leading up to Vanessa's death, explaining that they had been busy with last-minute wedding preparations. During the interrogation, a shocking revelation came to light. Jessica was not just Vanessa's friend, she was also her lover and secret wife. The two had been married for 3 years, a fact they had kept hidden from everyone, including Josh. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the investigation. Jessica admitted that she and Vanessa had been planning to defraud Josh by blackmailing him with compromising photos Vanessa had taken. Detective Collins noticed Jessica's nervousness as she spoke. Her voice trembled and she fidgeted with her hands. Despite her anxiety, Jessica insisted that she had no part in Vanessa's murder. She explained that their blackmail scheme was meant to secure financial stability for both of them, not to harm anyone. Jessica's emotional turmoil was evident, but she maintained her innocence throughout the questioning. The police asked Jessica about her whereabouts on the night of Vanessa's death. She provided an alibi stating that she had been at home, working on a marketing campaign for her company. She mentioned specific details about the campaign, including emails and files she had worked on, which the police later verified. They also collected Jessica's fingerprints and DNA samples to compare with the evidence found at the crime scene. Friends and colleagues described Jessica as a hardworking and dedicated individual. She was well-liked at her job and known for her positive attitude. However, the revelation of her secret relationship with Vanessa and their blackmail scheme cast a shadow over her character. As the investigation continued, Detective Collins and her team remained focused on uncovering the truth. Jessica's emotional state and detailed alibi were important factors, but the detectives knew they had to examine all aspects of her relationship with Vanessa and their secret plans. On July 2, 2019, 3 days after Vanessa Parker's death, a break in the case emerged. It was a humid afternoon in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, with temperatures climbing into the high 80s. Detective Sarah Collins received a call from a local resident who claimed to have found something suspicious while walking his dog in a nearby park. He had been walking his golden retriever, Buddy Rogers Jr., through Saybrook Point Park when Buddy started barking at a bush near the water's edge. Curious, he approached and discovered a smartphone partially hidden under the foliage. Realizing the potential significance, he immediately contacted the police. Detective Collins and her team quickly arrived at the scene. The phone was carefully collected and sent to the forensics lab for analysis. Within hours, technicians managed to unlock the phone and retrieve its data. What they found would change the course of the investigation. The phone belonged to Vanessa Parker. Among the texts, photos, and emails, investigators found a series of incriminating messages between Vanessa and her secret wife, co-conspirator and lover, Jessica Moore. The messages detailed their blackmail scheme against Josh Parker, with explicit instructions on how to execute their plan after the wedding. Additionally, the phone contained compromising photos of Josh that were meant to be used as leverage for blackmail. Detective Collins reviewed the new evidence with a mix of relief and determination. The messages revealed the extent of Vanessa and Jessica's plot, providing a clearer motive for the crime. The team also discovered a series of heated exchanges between Vanessa and an unknown number, later identified as belonging to Michael Reynolds, Vanessa's other spouse from San Diego. The text showed that Michael was furious about Vanessa's threats to release a sex tape involving her and his mother, adding another layer to the complex web of relationships and motives. With this new evidence, the police focused on tracking the movements of Jessica and Michael around the time of the murder. They checked surveillance footage from nearby stores and traffic cameras, trying to establish their whereabouts. The forensic team also compared the fingerprints and DNA found on the phone with those collected at the crime scene. The discovery of Vanessa's phone was a significant breakthrough. It provided crucial insights into the motives and actions of the key suspects. Detective Collins and her team felt a renewed sense of urgency and determination to bring the case to a close. They knew they were getting closer to uncovering the truth behind Vanessa Parker's tragic death. Michael Reynolds, Vanessa's other spouse, was the third person the police investigated. Michael, 40, worked as a construction manager in San Diego. He had a reputation for being hot-headed and had a tumultuous past with Vanessa. Despite moving on, he had occasional run-ins with her, leading to speculation about lingering feelings and unresolved issues. On July 3, 2019, Detective Sarah Collins and her team brought Michael in for questioning. Michael had flown in from San Diego after hearing about Vanessa's death. He appeared agitated and defensive during the interrogation, his frustration evident in his clenched fists and terse answers. He described his relationship with Vanessa as volatile, marked by frequent arguments and dramatic reconciliations. Michael revealed that Vanessa had been blackmailing him, threatening to release a sex tape she had made with his mother. This revelation painted a picture of Vanessa as manipulative and ruthless, willing to go to extreme lengths to control those around her. Michael admitted that he was furious with Vanessa, but insisted that he would never harm her. The police asked Michael about his whereabouts on the night of Vanessa's death. He claimed he was in San Diego working late on a construction project. Michael provided contact details for his coworkers, who corroborated his alibi. He also showed flight records to prove he had only arrived in Connecticut after learning about the murder. Detective Collins noticed Michael's volatility during the questioning. He frequently raised his voice and seemed on the verge of losing his temper. Despite his anger, Michael consistently denied any involvement in Vanessa's death. He expressed relief at being away from her manipulations, but also a sense of regret for the way their relationship had turned out. Friends and colleagues described Michael as hardworking but prone to outbursts of anger. His temper was well known in his professional circles, but he was also respected for his dedication to his work. The revelation of his tumultuous relationship with Vanessa and the blackmail added a layer of complexity to his character. The police collected Michael's fingerprints and DNA samples, comparing them with the evidence found at the crime scene. They also examined his phone records and text messages, looking for any signs of communication with Vanessa leading up to her death. As the investigation continued, Detective Collins and her team remained vigilant, aware that the truth was often hidden beneath layers of lies and deception. Michael's volatile nature and detailed alibi were crucial pieces of the puzzle, but the detectives knew they had to keep digging to uncover the full story behind Vanessa Parker's tragic death. On July 5, 2019, Detective Sarah Collins and her team finally identified the murderer. Josh Parker, Vanessa's husband, was the one who strangled her with her wedding veil. The breakthrough came after the police meticulously analyzed the evidence found on Vanessa's phone and the crime scene. Josh Parker, 33, had always seemed like the perfect husband. He was a calm and composed software engineer admired for his patience and supportive nature. However, beneath this calm exterior, Josh was struggling with the immense pressure of Vanessa's demanding personality and the financial strain of their $100,000 wedding. The discovery of Vanessa's secrets pushed him over the edge. The night before Vanessa's murder, Josh had discovered incriminating messages and photos on her phone. He found out about Vanessa's secret marriages to Jessica Moore and Michael Reynolds, as well as the blackmail schemes. This shocking betrayal led to a heated argument between Josh and Vanessa, which escalated into a physical struggle. Detective Collins pieced together the events leading up to the murder. Vanessa's veil was used to strangle her in the master bedroom, indicating a crime of passion. The disarray in the room and the evidence of a struggle pointed to Josh as the perpetrator. The police compared Josh's DNA and fingerprints with those found at the crime scene, confirming his involvement. On the evening of July 5, 2019, Detective Collins and her team moved in to arrest Josh Parker. They found him at the couple's home on Main Street, sitting in the living room, seemingly lost in thought. The officers approached him cautiously, explaining the charges and reading him his rights. Josh did not resist. Instead, he seemed resigned, his expression a mix of sorrow and relief. As the handcuffs were placed on Josh, he looked around the room one last time. He was not surprised by his arrest. He knew it was inevitable. The Parker family's reactions were a mix of shock and sorrow. Vanessa's parents, Robert and Linda Parker, were devastated by the news, struggling to comprehend the tragedy that had unfolded. Vanessa's sister, Emily, was inconsolable, mourning the loss of her sister and the collapse of their family. The arrest of Josh Parker brought some closure to the investigation, but left a trail of heartbreak in its wake. The Parker family and their friends grappled with the reality of Vanessa's death and the betrayal within their own home. The community of Old Saybrook was left reeling, trying to make sense of the tragic events that had shattered their sense of security. The trial of Josh Parker began on October 15, 2022, at the Middlesex Superior Court in Middletown, Connecticut. The courtroom was packed with media, including reporters from the Hartford Courant and Channel 3 Eyewitness News. The case had attracted significant attention due to the shocking nature of the crime and the revelations about Vanessa Parker's secret lives. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Lisa Brown Hemley, a 45-year-old known for her tenacity and keen legal mind. Brown Hemley argued that Josh Parker had premeditated the murder after discovering Vanessa's secret marriages and blackmail schemes. She presented the evidence found on Vanessa's phone, including the incriminating messages and photos, as well as the forensic evidence linking Josh to the crime scene. Brown Hemley painted a picture of a man pushed to his limits by betrayal and financial stress, culminating in a violent act of rage. The defense attorney, Brian Stevens, a 50-year-old with a reputation for his persuasive arguments and empathetic approach, argued that Josh Parker had acted in a moment of temporary insanity. Stevens claimed that the discovery of Vanessa's double life and deceit had caused Josh to lose control. He portrayed Josh as a loving husband driven to a breaking point by the overwhelming stress and emotional turmoil. The trial lasted 3 weeks with emotional testimonies from family members and friends. Vanessa's parents, Robert and Linda Parker, attended every day, their faces etched with grief. Vanessa's sister, Emily, often broke down in tears, struggling to cope with the loss and the betrayal by her brother-in-law. The courtroom atmosphere was tense, with both the prosecution and defense presenting compelling arguments. On November 19, 2022, the jury delivered their verdict. Josh Parker was found guilty of second-degree murder. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Vanessa's family expressed relief that justice had been served, though the pain of their loss remained. Some community members felt the sentence was too lenient, given the premeditated nature of the crime. Judge Karen Miller sentenced Josh Parker to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. In her sentencing remarks, she acknowledged the emotional and psychological strain Josh had been under, but emphasized that taking a life was an unforgivable act. Josh showed little reaction as the sentence was read, his face a mask of resignation. The verdict and sentencing had a profound impact on all involved. Vanessa's family and friends continued to grapple with their grief, finding some solace in the justice system's decision. The trial's outcome was seen as a step toward healing, though the scars left by Vanessa's death, and the trial would linger for years to come. After the trial, the lives of everyone involved were forever changed. Josh Parker began serving his 25-year prison sentence at the McDougall-Walker Correctional Institution in Suffield, Connecticut. The facility, known for its high security, became Josh's new home as he adjusted to life behind bars. Reports from local news outlets, including the Hartford Courant, followed his transition, noting his attempts to come to terms with his actions and the reality of his long sentence. Josh's family struggled to cope with the fallout. His parents, who had been supportive throughout the trial, found it difficult to visit him. They faced the dual challenge of dealing with their son's incarceration and the public scrutiny surrounding the case. They occasionally spoke with reporters, expressing their sorrow over the tragedy and their hope for Josh's eventual redemption. Vanessa Parker's family tried to rebuild their lives after the trial. Vanessa's parents, Robert and Linda Parker, continued to live in Old Saybrook, where they were active in local memorial activities to honor Vanessa's memory. They set up a scholarship fund in her name at her alma mater, the University of Connecticut, to support students pursuing careers in event planning. The scholarship was reported by local media as a way to keep Vanessa's legacy alive and contribute positively to the community. Jessica Moore, who had initially been a key suspect, faced her own challenges. Though she was not charged with any crime, the revelation of her secret marriage to Vanessa and their blackmail scheme led to a significant loss of her professional reputation. Jessica left her job as a marketing manager and moved to a different state to start anew, distancing herself from the scandal. She maintained a low profile, with few public appearances reported. Michael Reynolds, Vanessa's other spouse, also tried to move forward. He continued his work in San Diego but faced ongoing media attention due to his involvement in the case. He occasionally spoke out about the impact of Vanessa's blackmail on his life, expressing his hope for personal healing and closure. Overall, the aftermath of Vanessa Parker's murder and Josh Parker's trial left deep emotional scars on all involved. The community of Old Saybrook slowly began to recover, with residents coming together to support one another and remember Vanessa. The tragic events had a lasting impact, shaping the lives of those involved for years to come. Lisa Turner was a 45-year-old stay-at-home mom who lived in Pineville, North Carolina, an upper-middle-class suburb of Charlotte. Lisa was very active in her community. She was a member of the local PTA, where she organized fundraisers and events for the school. She was also a devoted member of her church's choir, where she sang every Sunday. Lisa had a friendly demeanor and was always willing to help others. She was considered a pillar of the community, someone everyone could rely on. Lisa had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but those dreams were put on hold when she married Rod Turner, a successful corporate lawyer, and decided to focus on raising their two children, Carmel, 17, and Militia, 14. Despite her busy life, Lisa always found time for her family and friends. Behind her perfect suburban life, Lisa felt unfulfilled and lonely. Rob, 48, had been working long hours at his job, dealing with high-profile banks and helping them find legal loopholes to evict people from their homes during the Great Recession. This created a distance between them, and Lisa often felt like she was living in a gilded cage. She craved excitement and attention, something she wasn't getting at home. In the days before her death, Lisa was busy with her usual activities. She was planning the church's upcoming Easter event, making decorations and organizing volunteers. She was also seen at the local Starbucks, sipping a latte and chatting with friends. To the outside world, Lisa seemed happy and content, but inside she was struggling. Lisa's personality was warm and welcoming. She had a smile for everyone and a kind word for those in need. Her friends described her as generous and caring. She dreamed of a life where she felt truly loved and appreciated. However, little did anyone know Lisa had found this attention in the arms of Jason Brace Collins, the 18-year-old son of her neighbor. Lisa's secret affair with Jason provided the thrill she longed for. She documented her feelings and experiences in a hidden journal, expressing the excitement and guilt she felt. In her final days, Lisa was torn between her duties as a mother and wife and her desire for something more. However, on the morning of March 21, 2012, Lisa's life would be tragically cut short, leaving the community of Pinville in shock and mourning. On the morning of March 21, 2012, around 7:30 a.m., Rob Turner came home early from a business trip to surprise his wife. He had been away in New York City for a meeting with a big bank client and took an early flight back to Pinville. Expecting to find Lisa making breakfast for their kids, Rob instead walked into a scene of horror. When Rob entered the kitchen, he found Lisa lying on the floor in a pool of blood. The room was a mess with broken dishes and blood splatters on the walls and floor. Lisa had been shot and stabbed multiple times. Even more shocking, the number 3-04 was carved into her stomach. Rob, in complete shock, dropped his suitcase and rushed to her side, but it was clear she was already gone. Rob immediately called 911. His voice trembled as he told the dispatcher about the scene he had walked into. He kept repeating, she's gone," over and over. The dispatcher tried to keep him calm and instructed him to wait for the police to arrive. Rob stayed by Lisa's side, crying and holding her hand, unable to comprehend what had happened. The first police officer arrived within minutes. Officer Diller, who was on patrol nearby, responded to the call. When she entered the house and saw the scene, she was stunned but quickly took control of the situation. She guided Rob away from the body and secured the area, waiting for the detectives to arrive. Rob Turner was still in shock. He could barely speak as the officers tried to question him about the events leading up to his discovery. He kept saying he couldn't believe this was happening and that Lisa was gone. Lisa's body was taken to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy, while the detectives began their investigation. The news of Lisa's murder quickly spread through Pinville. It was reported on local TV stations like WSOC TV, and neighbors gathered outside the Turner home, trying to understand how such a terrible thing could happen in their quiet community. The Pinville police arrived quickly after Rod Turner's 911 call on March 21, 2012. Officer Natera Miller, who was patrolling nearby, was the first on the scene. She found Rob in a state of shock, holding Lisa's hand. Officer Miller immediately secured the area and called for backup. Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Vidria, both seasoned investigators, arrived soon after. Detective Williams, known for her meticulous nature, surveyed the chaotic crime scene. The kitchen was a mess. Broken dishes and blood were everywhere. Lisa had been shot and then stabbed multiple times. The number 304 was carved into her stomach, a chilling and mysterious detail. Detective Williams and Officer Vidria began their investigation methodically. They photographed the crime scene from every angle, documenting the blood splatters, broken items, and Lisa's body. They used luminol to detect hidden blood traces and collected fingerprints from surfaces like countertops and doorknobs.
DNA samples were taken from various objects, hoping to find something that could identify the killer. The brutality of the attack suggested a crime of passion. Detective Williams considered possible motives. The number carved into Lisa's stomach seemed personal, as if the killer wanted to send a message. They found no signs of forced entry, suggesting Lisa knew her attacker. Rob Turner was taken to the police station for further questioning. Still in shock, he struggled to provide coherent answers. Detective Williams knew they needed to tread carefully with him. They asked about his recent business trip, his relationship with Lisa, and if she had any enemies. Rob mentioned his long work hours and their strained marriage, but denied any involvement in her death. The forensic team continued to gather evidence. They found a partially burnt diary in the fireplace, which contained entries too charred to be legible. This discovery added a new layer to the investigation, revealing something that might possibly be the motive behind the murder. The police also canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing neighbors and searching for witnesses. Some neighbors mentioned hearing loud noises the night before, but didn't think much of it. Others spoke highly of Lisa and her involvement in the community, expressing shock that such a tragedy could occur. Local news stations like WSOC-TV reported the murder, and the community of Pinneville was gripped by fear and curiosity. Detective Williams knew they had to solve this case quickly to bring peace to the neighborhood and justice for Lisa Turner. The first person the police investigated was Rob Turner, Lisa's husband. Rob, 48, was a successful corporate lawyer known for his stern, no-nonsense attitude. He worked long hours with high-profile banks, often helping them to find legal loophole that would allow them to evict people from their homes during the Great Recession. This demanding job had created a distance between him and Lisa. Despite this, Rob was deeply committed to his family and had no known history of violence. After discovering Lisa's body on the morning of March 21, 2012, Rob was in a state of shock. He called 911 immediately and was visibly shaken when the police arrived. Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Vidria knew they needed to question Rob thoroughly. They took him to the police station to get his statement. At the station, Rob sat in a small, sterile interrogation room. He was pale and had dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. Detective Williams started with basic questions about his trip to New York City, his relationship with Lisa, and our family life. Rob explained that he had been away on a business trip and returned early to surprise Lisa. He described their marriage as strained, but insisted he would never harm her. Rob's responses were cooperative but filled with grief. He repeatedly stated his love for Lisa and his devastation over her death. He admitted that their relationship had been difficult lately due to his long hours at work, but he denied any involvement in her murder. Rob's lawyer, a sharp attorney, sat beside him, ensuring that Rob's rights were protected throughout the interrogation. The police also looked into Rob's alibi. They verified his flight details and confirmed he had indeed been in New York City for a meeting with a major bank. His colleagues and clients backed up his story, providing a solid alibi for the time of the murder. Despite Rob's cooperation and strong alibi, Detective Williams and her team still had to consider him a suspect. The brutality of the crime suggested a personal motive, and as Lisa's husband, Rob was a primary person of interest. However, without any concrete evidence linking him to the scene, the police had to continue their investigation and look into other potential suspects. The next suspect the police investigated was Jason Brace Collins, the 18-year-old son of Lisa's neighbor. Jason had just graduated from high school and was planning to major in engineering. He was well-liked in the community, known for his charm and good looks. However, a secret affair between him and Lisa had recently come to light, adding a new twist to the investigation. Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Vidria called Jason in for questioning. Jason arrived at the police station looking nervous. He sat in the interrogation room, fidgeting with his hands. The detectives started by asking him about his relationship with Lisa. Jason admitted to the affair but claimed it was consensual and that he loved her. He said that Lisa had provided him with attention and excitement he couldn't find elsewhere. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of March 20, Jason said he was at home playing video games. He mentioned specific games like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 3, which was popular at the time. However, his alibi was weak since he was alone and had no one to confirm his story. Jason's behavior during the interrogation was erratic. At times he was calm, but he also showed bursts of anger and frustration. When detectives pressed him about the affair, he became defensive, insisting he would never hurt Lisa. He talked about their relationship,
describing it as passionate but not violent. The police found Jason's nervousness suspicious and decided to search his home. They obtained a warrant and conducted a thorough search of his room. They found several explicit love letters from Lisa and some naked photos of them together, further confirming their relationship. However, they didn't find any physical evidence linking Jason to the murder. Neighbors reported seeing Jason acting strangely in the days following Lisa's death. Some said he seemed agitated and jumpy. Others mentioned he was less friendly and more withdrawn than usual. The police took note of these observations, but needed more concrete evidence to make an arrest. The community was shocked by the revelation of the affair. The once charming boy next door was now under a cloud of suspicion. Detective Williams knew they had to dig deeper into Jason's background and relationship with Lisa to uncover the truth. While Jason's affair with Lisa provided a possible motive, the police still needed more evidence to link him directly to the murder. They continued their investigation, knowing that solving this case required careful scrutiny of every detail. The third suspect the police investigated was Paula Brace Collins, Lisa's best friend and next-door neighbor. Paula, 43, was a stay-at-home mom who shared almost everything with Lisa. She was also passionate about running the choir at their church. Recently, Paula had grown suspicious of Lisa's behavior, fearing it might affect their friendship and her family, though she completely unaware of Lisa's affair with her son, Jason. Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Vidria called Paula in for questioning. Paula arrived at the station looking worried but composed. In the small interrogation room, Detective Williams asked Paula about her relationship with Lisa. Paula spoke fondly of Lisa, describing her as a dear friend and confidant. However, Paula admitted she had noticed Lisa acting strangely in recent months and had been concerned. When asked about her whereabouts on the night of March 20, Paula said she was at home, preparing for the upcoming church event. She mentioned specific tasks like making decorations and organizing a volunteer list, tasks she could verify with other church members. Paula's alibi seemed solid, but the detectives pressed further. Detective Williams asked Paula if she knew about Lisa's affair with Jason. Paula was shocked and visibly upset. She insisted she had no idea about the affair and that she would have never condoned such behavior. Her reaction appeared genuine, and the detectives noted her distress. The police then asked Paula if she had any reason to harm Lisa. Paula vehemently denied any motive, stating that she loved Lisa like a sister and would never hurt her. She became emotional, tears welling up in her eyes, and continued to deny any involvement in Lisa's death. To corroborate Paula's alibi, the detectives interviewed other members of the church choir. They confirmed that Paula had been working on church preparations that night. Additionally, neighbors reported seeing Paula at home, further supporting her account. Despite Paula's solid alibi, the police still had to consider her a suspect due to her close relationship with both Lisa and Jason. They searched Paula's house for any evidence but found nothing linking her to the murder. The community of Pinneville was shaken as local news stations, including WSOC-TV, Charlotte's local news leader, reported on Paula's questioning, casting suspicion on another pillar of the community. Detective Williams and Officer Vidria continued to investigate, knowing that Paula's strong alibi and lack of evidence made it difficult to link her to the crime. They needed to explore every possible angle to uncover the truth behind Lisa Turner's brutal murder. On the morning of March 25, 2012, a break in the case came with a surprising discovery. It was a sunny day in Pinneville, and Detective Tiana Williams received a call from a local resident named Leah Johnson. Leah was walking her dog in a nearby park when she found a small leather-bound journal partially buried under a bush. She quickly reported it to the police, thinking it might be connected to the recent murder. Detective Williams and Officer Mark Vidria rushed to the park to retrieve the journal. They carefully placed it in an evidence bag and took it back to the station for examination. The journal turned out to be a photocopy of Lisa Turner's secret diary, but one that was too burnt to be able to read, containing detailed and graphic entries about her affair with Jason Brace Collins. It also included her thoughts and feelings about her marriage and her sense of loneliness. The diary entries revealed that Lisa had been planning to end the affair with Jason. She felt guilty about betraying her family and wanted to focus on repairing her marriage and her church work. In addition, Lisa noted strange changes in Jason's behavior. She described how he thought he was lighted by the angel's light and how he badgered her to have sex with him 12 times a day. The last entry, dated March 19, mentioned her intention to meet Jason to break off the relationship. This new evidence shifted the focus of the investigation. Detective Williams and her team realized that Jason's obsession with Lisa might have driven him to murder her when she tried to end things. The diary also included several entries describing how Lisa seduced Jason by bathing naked in her backyard, which had a direct line of sight to his bedroom. These entries painted a calculated and disturbing picture of their intense and tumultuous relationship. The police decided to bring Jason in for further questioning. They confronted him with the diary entries, hoping to get a reaction. Jason initially denied everything, but when faced with the detailed descriptions of their affair, he broke down. He admitted to being in love with Lisa and feeling devastated when she wanted to end things. Detective Williams noticed that Jason's behavior was erratic and decided to have him undergo a psychological evaluation. The results indicated that Jason might be suffering from an undiagnosed bipolar disorder, which could explain his extreme reactions and mood swings. This information added a new layer to the investigation, suggesting that Jason's mental state could have played a role in the crime. The community of Pennville was eager for answers, and the pressure on the police to solve the case increased. Detective Williams and her team continued to piece together the evidence, knowing they were closer to uncovering the truth behind Lisa Turner's tragic death. On March 26, 2012, the police made a breakthrough in the case. After reviewing Lisa Turner's diary and conducting a psychological evaluation of Jason Brace Collins, the evidence pointed clearly to him as the prime suspect. Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Gidriad decided it was time to bring Jason in for a formal arrest. Jason Brace Collins, 18, was known for his charm and good looks, but the investigation revealed a darker side. Jason had fallen deeply in love with Lisa, and when she tried to end their affair, he couldn't handle it. His undiagnosed bipolar disorder likely contributed to his extreme reaction. Jason had become possessive and obsessed with Lisa, and the thought of losing her drove him to a fit of rage. The murder occurred on the night of March 20. Jason had gone to the Turner house for sex, knowing Rob was away on a business trip. Lisa let him in, intending to end the relationship. An argument ensued, escalating quickly. Jason, overwhelmed by his emotions, shot Lisa and then stabbed her multiple times. The number 304 carved into her stomach was a final twisted act of control. On the morning of March 26, around 10 a.m., the police arrived at the Brace Collins home to arrest Jason. Detective Williams led the team. They knocked on the door, and Paula Brace Collins answered, shocked to see the police. Jason was inside, and when he saw the officers, he tried to run but was quickly apprehended. Jason's reaction to the arrest was a mix of surprise and resignation. He didn't resist but looked defeated, knowing his actions had caught up with him. He was handcuffed and taken to the police station. During the ride, he remained silent, staring blankly ahead. The news of Jason's arrest spread quickly through Pennville. Local TV stations, including WSOC-TV, reported the developments. The community was in shock, especially those who knew Jason as the charming boy next door. The Turner family, devastated by Lisa's death, expressed relief that the murderer had been caught. They were grateful to the police for their hard work, but still struggled with their loss. At the police station, Jason was booked and charged with first-degree murder. He confessed to the crime during interrogation, detailing how his love for Lisa had turned into an uncontrollable obsession. He admitted that when Lisa tried to break up with him, he snapped and killed her in a fit of rage. Jason's arrest brought some closure to the community, but the pain of losing Lisa Turner lingered. Her family and friends tried to move forward, but the memory of that tragic night remained fresh in their minds. The trial of Jason Brace Collins began on July 15, 2012, at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with members of the Pineville community, including Lisa Turner's family and friends. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Leah Kastrowitz, a 50-year-old seasoned lawyer known for her tough stance on violent crimes. Leah presented a strong case, detailing how Jason's obsession with Lisa had driven him to commit the murder. Leah Kastrowitz described the brutal nature of the crime, emphasizing the shooting and stabbing, as well as the number 304 carved into Lisa's stomach. She brought in forensic experts to explain the evidence collected at the scene, including DNA and fingerprints linking Jason to the crime. She also presented entries from Lisa's diary, which documented her affair with Jason and her plans to end it. The defense attorney, Richard Blake, was a 45-year-old lawyer known for his calm and methodical approach. He argued that Jason's undiagnosed bipolar disorder played a significant role in his actions. Richard called in medical experts who testified about Jason's mental state, explaining how his condition could have led to a loss of control. He also highlighted Jason's young age and lack of prior criminal records, suggesting that he deserved leniency. Throughout the trial, Lisa Turner's family watched with heavy hearts. Her husband, Rob, and their children, Carmel and Militia, often broke down in tears as they listened to the details of her murder. The community members who attended the trial showed their support for the Turner family, hoping for justice to be served. After weeks of testimonies and deliberations, the jury reached a verdict. On August 12, 2012, Jason Brace Collins was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read, and Jason showed little emotion, accepting his fate with a blank stare. The verdict brought a sense of closure to Lisa's family and friends, but the pain of losing her remained. They believed the punishment was just, given the brutality of the crime and the impact it had on their lives. The community of Pineville felt a mix of relief and sorrow, knowing that justice had been served but that they have lost a cherished member of their community. Local news stations like LUSOC-TV covered the trial extensively, highlighting the emotional journey of the Turner family and the community's response to the verdict. The trial and its outcome were discussed in homes, schools, and churches, as everyone tried to make sense of the tragedy that had shaken their quiet suburb. After the trial of Jason Brace Collins concluded, life in Pineville began to slowly return to normal, though the scars of Lisa Turner's murder still lingered. For the Turner family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, knowing that Jason would spend the rest of his life behind bars for taking Lisa away from them. Rob Turner focused on rebuilding his life and supporting his children, Carmel and Militia, who struggled with the loss of their mother. The community rallied around the Turner family, offering support and comfort in various forms. Neighbors organized meal trains and childcare assistance, easing the burden on Rob as he adjusted to being a single parent. The local church, where Lisa had been an active member, held memorial services in her honor, celebrating her life and the impact she had on others. Meanwhile, Paula Brace Collins faced her own challenges. As Jason's mother and Lisa's best friend, Paula was devastated by the betrayal and the loss of both her son and her closest confidant. She withdrew from church activities and community events, choosing instead to focus on supporting Jason through letters and occasional visits to the prison. Jason, now incarcerated at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, adjusted to life behind bars. He received counseling and medication for his bipolar disorder, aiming to manage his condition while serving his sentence. Although he expressed remorse for his actions, Jason understood the severity of his crime and the impact it had on Lisa's family and the community. The community of Pineville remained vigilant but began to move forward, cherishing the memories of Lisa Turner while looking ahead to brighter days. The tragic events of March 2012 had left an indelible mark, but through unity and resilience, Pineville continued to be a close-knit suburb where neighbors supported one another through life's challenges. This is the story of Sarah Miller, a compassionate nurse, loving wife, and mother whose life was cruelly cut short, a victim of a twisted love triangle. It was a calm, sunny morning in Roseville, California on March 15, 2021. Around 7:30 a.m., David Miller, Sarah's husband, called 911 in a panic. "I found my wife unresponsive," he shouted into the phone. The operator tried to keep him calm as she dispatched emergency services to their home in a quiet suburban neighborhood known for its safety and friendly community. David claimed he had just returned from his regular early morning jog. When David entered the house, everything seemed normal at first. The smell of coffee from the kitchen lingered in the air, and the kids' toys were scattered around, a usual sight in the Miller household. But as David walked upstairs to their bedroom, he knew something was wrong. The door was slightly ajar, which was unusual. When he pushed it open, he found Sarah lying on the floor near their bed, a pair of panties tied around her neck. She wasn't moving. David rushed to her side, trying to wake her up, but she was unresponsive. He quickly checked for a pulse and, finding none, grabbed his phone to call for help. The Roseville Fire Department and police arrived at the scene within minutes. Roseville is known for its prompt emergency response, and this day was no different. Paramedics rushed upstairs, but soon confirmed the worst. Sarah Miller was dead. David was inconsolable, pacing back and forth in the living room, his hands shaking. He kept muttering, "How could this happen?" over and over. Neighbors soon gathered outside the Miller home, drawn by the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles. News spread quickly in the close-knit community, and by mid-morning, local reporters from the Roseville Press Tribune and even Sacramento's KCRA3 were on the scene. looking for details about what had happened in one of the city's most peaceful neighborhoods. David, now a suspect, was taken to the police station for questioning. His tear-streaked face and trembling hands made it clear he was in shock. But for the police, this was just the beginning of a complex and tragic investigation into the life and death of Sarah Miller. Sarah Miller was 37 years old and worked as a nurse at Sutter-Roseville Medical Center. She was known for her compassionate and dedicated nature, always putting her patients first. Sarah lived in a charming two-story house in Roseville with her husband, David, and their two children, Mitt, aged 8, and Catcher, aged 5. Sarah graduated from the University of California, Davis, with a degree in nursing. She was well-liked by her classmates and professors, who admired her dedication and drive. After college, she quickly found a job at Sutter-Roseville, where she worked for over a decade. Her colleagues often said she had a special way with patients, always knowing how to comfort and care for them. She was the type of person who would drop everything to help someone in need. In her personal life, Sarah enjoyed simple pleasures. She loved gardening, and her backyard was filled with blooming flowers and plants. She also enjoyed cooking, often trying new recipes from her favorite cooking shows and food blogs. Her kids loved her homemade chocolate chip cookies, a recipe passed down from her grandmother. In the days leading up to her death, Sarah seemed happy and focused on her family and work. She had recently celebrated Mitt's birthday with a small family party. They had cake, played games, and even watched Mitt's favorite movie, The Hangover 2. Sarah had also been working extra shifts at the hospital, helping out during the COVID-19 pandemic. She was always willing to lend a hand, and her dedication did not go unnoticed by her supervisors. Sarah had dreams for the future. She talked about taking a family trip to France once things returned to normal. She also wanted to go back to school to specialize in pediatric nursing, a field she felt passionate about. Her friends and family knew her as a loving mother, a devoted wife, and a true friend. Sarah's tragic death left a huge void in the lives of those who knew and loved her. Her colleagues at the hospital were in shock, and her family was heartbroken. Sarah Miller's life was one of dedication, love, and kindness, and her loss was deeply felt by the Roseville community. The Roseville Police Department responded quickly to the 911 call from David Miller on March 15, 2021. They arrived at the Miller residence within minutes. Leading the investigation was Detective Laura Benedicto, a seasoned investigator known for her meticulous attention to detail. Detective Benedicto, along with her partner, Detective Julian Collins, began examining the scene. The Miller's home, located in a peaceful suburb, was now a crime scene. The bedroom where Sarah Miller was found was in disarray. Clothes were scattered on the floor, and the bed was unmade. A broken picture frame lay near Sarah's body, adding to the chaotic scene. Sarah had been strangled with her own panties, a detail that suggested a crime of passion. Detectives Benedicto and Collins began their investigation by collecting evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, collected DNA samples, and took numerous photographs of the scene. They also interviewed David Miller, who was visibly shaken and distraught. David claimed he had been out jogging and found Sarah when he returned. Despite his grief, detectives noted some inconsistencies in his account. The police brought in forensic experts to assist with the investigation. They used advanced tools and techniques to gather as much information as possible. Forensic scientists examined the broken picture frame and other items in the room for fingerprints and DNA. They also analyzed the Julians on Sarah's neck to determine the force and angle of the strangulation. Every detail was crucial in piecing together what had happened. Detective Benedicto spoke to the neighbors, who were shocked by the news. Roseville was known for its low crime rate, and something like this was almost unheard of. Neighbors reported seeing David go for his morning jog, as he usually did, but no one had seen anything suspicious. One neighbor mentioned hearing raised voices coming from the Miller house the night before, which added a new layer to the investigation. As the day went on, the police continued their work, carefully preserving the crime scene and gathering as much evidence as they could. Detective Benedicto and her team were determined to find out who was responsible for Sarah's death. They worked late into the night, reviewing the evidence and interviewing everyone who might have information. The crime scene was eventually cleared, but the investigation was far from over. Detective Benedicto knew that the key to solving the case lay in the details. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, could be the clue that cracked the case. The Roseville Police Department was committed to finding justice for Sarah Miller and bringing her killer to account. The first suspect in the investigation was David Miller, Sarah's husband. David was 40 years old and worked as a sales executive for a tech company in Sacramento. He was known for his charming and outgoing personality, making him successful in his career. However, behind closed doors, David had been unfaithful of engaging in multiple extramarital affairs. This detail quickly made him a person of interest in the case. David was brought to the police station for questioning. Detective Laura Benedicto and Detective Julian Collins led the interrogation. David appeared distraught and exhausted. He revealed that instead of jogging in Mayhew Park at the time of Sarah's murder, which is what he told the 911 operator and police initially, he was actually having sex with his lover, Emile Rochefort, that morning. David explained that he often went to Emile for sex to clear his mind and deal with stress. Despite his apparent grief, detectives noticed inconsistencies in David's story. When asked about his relationship with Sarah, David described it as strained but loving. He admitted to his affairs, explaining that they were a way to cope with the pressures of work and family life. He seemed sincere, but the detectives were not convinced. During the interrogation, David was asked about his sexual relationship with Emile Rochefort, a 25-year-old personal trainer. David admitted to the affair, but insisted that Emile had nothing to do with Sarah's death. He claimed that Emile was his alibi, as they had been having sex on the morning of the murder. David's calm demeanor and detailed answers raised suspicions among the investigators. They found it odd that he could be so composed given the circumstances. To verify David's alibi, the police contacted Emile Rochefort. Emile confirmed that he and David had been together that morning, but his story also had some inconsistencies. This further complicated the investigation. Detectives Benedicto and Collins decided to dig deeper into David's personal life. They discovered text messages and emails that revealed the extent of his infidelity and his turbulent relationship with Sarah. Neighbors and friends were interviewed, and many described David as charming but sometimes aloof. Some neighbors recalled hearing arguments from the Miller household, especially in recent weeks. This information painted a picture of a marriage under strain, adding to the suspicion surrounding David. Despite his outward calm, David's manipulative and deceitful nature began to emerge. Detectives were now more determined than ever to find out if David's facade of innocence was hiding a darker truth. The investigation into Sarah's death was just beginning, and David Miller remained a key suspect. The second suspect in the investigation was Emile Rochefort, a 25-year-old personal trainer, and David Miller's lover. Emile was a French national known for his attractive looks, fit physique, and confident demeanor. He worked at a high-end gym in Sacramento, popular among the city's elite. Emile was ambitious and driven, often pursuing what he wanted without much regard for others. Detectives Laura Benedicto and Julian Collins brought Emile in for questioning. Emile appeared calm and collected, but his bold personality was evident. He did not shy away from admitting his relationship with David. In fact, he seemed almost proud of it. Emile described how he met David at the gym and how their relationship quickly developed after David made a sexual advance at him in the gym's bathroom. Emile's motive for potentially harming Sarah became a point of interest. Detectives discovered text messages between Emile and David where Emile referred to Sarah in vicious and derogatory terms, calling her an old cow whose milk is already spoiled. This suggested a deep resentment towards Sarah. When asked about these messages, Emile dismissed them as harmless jokes. During the interrogation, Emile claimed that he and David had broken up after he found sexually explicit text between David and another man named George. Emile explained that he felt betrayed and hurt by David's infidelity. Despite this, he maintained that he had no reason to harm Sarah. He said he was at his apartment alone on the night of the murder. The detectives noted Emile's defensiveness and his quickness to deflect blame onto others. Emile insisted that David was the one with more to lose if Sarah found out about the affairs. He painted a picture of David as a desperate man willing to go to great lengths to protect his secrets. Emile's alibi was weak, and his aggressive attitude during questioning did little to help his case. Detectives continued to press him, but Emile stuck to his story. He repeatedly denied any involvement in Sarah's death, suggesting that the real culprit was David or his mysterious lover George. Despite his confident exterior, Emile's texts and demeanor raised many red flags for the investigators. His willingness to speak negatively about Sarah and his rocky relationship with David added complexity to the case. Detectives Benedicto and Collins knew they needed to gather more evidence before drawing any conclusions. As the investigation progressed, Emil remained a suspect. His bold personality and lack of a solid alibi made him a person of interest. The detectives were determined to uncover the truth and find out who was responsible for Sarah Miller's tragic death. The third suspect in the investigation was George F. Kessler, a close friend of the Miller family. George was 65 years old and a former Olympic skier. He had a quiet demeanor and was known for being friendly and helpful. George often spent time with the Millers and was considered a reliable family friend. Detectives Laura Benedicto and Julian Collins brought George in for questioning. He appeared calm but surprised by the call. George explained that he had known David and Sarah for many years. He described his relationship with them as close and supportive, especially after David confided in him about his marital issues. George's potential motive became clearer during the interrogation. Investigations revealed that George was not just a friend, but also David's current lover and sexual partner. This relationship had been kept secret, adding another layer to the complex web of deceit. George admitted that he and David had recently become romantically involved, which created tension with Sarah. Detectives asked George about his whereabouts on the morning of March 15, 2021. George claimed he was at home, recovering from a recent knee surgery. He provided medical records to support his statement, but the detectives were not fully convinced. They pressed him about his knowledge of David's affairs and Sarah's discovery of them. George's answers were calm and measured, but detectives noticed signs of stress. He admitted that Sarah had confided in him about David's affair with Emile Rochefort. Sarah had discovered the affair just weeks before her death and was gathering evidence to confront David. George knew about Sarah's plans but claimed he had no involvement in her death. Text messages between George and David revealed a complicated relationship. One message from George read, "I can't keep loving you. This has to stop." This indicated that George was deeply involved in the situation and might have felt pressured by David's actions. When confronted with these messages, George became more defensive, insisting that he only wanted to help David and had no motive to harm Sarah. Detectives Benedicto and Collins noted George's jealousy and his complex relationship with the Millers. As a childless bachelor, George might have been envious of the family life David had with Sarah. This envy, coupled with the stress of maintaining this secret relationship with David, raised more questions about his potential involvement. Despite his calm exterior, George's connection to David and his knowledge of Sarah's plans made him a key suspect. The detectives continued to investigate, knowing that every detail could bring them closer to solving the case and uncovering the truth behind Sarah Miller's tragic death. On March 18, 2021, just 3 days after Sarah Miller's tragic death, the weather in Roseville was cloudy with a slight chill in the air. Detective Laura Benedicto received a call from a neighbor who had found something suspicious in a nearby park. The neighbor, an early riser, was walking his dog in Maydew Park when he stumbled upon a small black duffel bag partially hidden under a bush. Detective Benedicto and her team quickly arrived at the scene. The park, usually bustling with joggers and families, was eerily quiet that morning. The duffel bag was carefully examined and opened. Inside, the police found a pair of gloves, a rope, and a smartphone. These items were immediately collected as evidence and sent to the forensic lab for analysis. The police's response to this new evidence was swift and thorough. Forensic experts worked quickly to analyze the contents of the bag. The gloves and rope were tested for fingerprints and DNA, while the smartphone was examined for any data that might provide clues. The phone was a newer model, and after some technical work, the team managed to unlock it. What they found on the smartphone was shocking. Text messages and emails between David Miller and Emile Rochefort were uncovered. The messages included heated exchanges about their relationship and discussions about Sarah. One message from David to Emile read, "We need to figure this out before that bleeping cow finds out everything." This raised new questions about the involvement of both men in Sarah's death. Detective Benedicto was particularly interested in the GPS data from the phone. The record showed that the phone had been in the vicinity of the Miller residence on the morning of the murder, contradicting Emile's claim that he was at his apartment. This evidence was crucial, as it placed Emile closer to the crime scene than he had admitted. The discovery of the duffel bag and its contents provided the detectives with significant new leads. They re-interviewed both David and Emile, confronting them with the new evidence. David continued to deny any involvement, while Emile's confident demeanor began to crack. He became defensive and struggled to explain the incriminating messages and GPS data. Detective Benedicto and her team realized they were getting closer to the truth. The new evidence not only strengthened their suspicions, but also provided a clearer picture of the events leading up to Sarah's death. The investigation intensified as they worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle and bring justice to Sarah Miller. On March 20, 2021, the Roseville Police Department made a breakthrough in the investigation. Detective Laura Benedicto had been reviewing all the evidence collected, including the text messages, DNA results, and alibis. A key piece of evidence was a strand of hair found on the rope used to strangle Sarah. The DNA analysis matched David Miller's profile. Detectives Benedicto and Julian Collins pieced together the timeline of events. They discovered that David had learned about Sarah's intention to file for divorce after finding out about his affair with Emile Rochefort. David feared losing his family and reputation, which drove him to a desperate act. The detectives also revisited the GPS data from the smartphone found in the duffel bag. It showed that David had been near the Miller residence during the time he claimed to be jogging. This contradicted his alibi and placed him at the scene of the crime. With the mounting evidence, the detectives were confident they had their murderer. On the morning of March 21, 2021, the police arrived at the Miller residence. David was in the kitchen, making breakfast for his children. He was calm, but the detectives noticed a slight tremor in his hands. When Detective Benedicto informed David that he was under arrest for the murder of his wife, his face turned pale. He tried to protest, but the evidence was overwhelming. David was handcuffed and taken into custody. As he was led away, neighbors watched in shock. David's reaction was a mix of disbelief and resignation. He did not struggle, knowing that his attempts to cover up his crime had failed. The arrest was a turning point in the case, bringing some relief to the community. Sarah's family was informed about the arrest. They were heartbroken, but also relieved that the person responsible for her death was finally caught. Sarah's parents expressed their gratitude to the police for their diligent work. Mitt and Catcher, Sarah's children, were too young to fully understand what was happening, but they were surrounded by family and friends who offered support. David's arrest was covered extensively in the local news. The Roseville community, known for its safety, was shaken by the tragic event. The case highlighted the dark side of seemingly perfect lives and the length some people would go to protect their secrets. As David sat in his cell, awaiting trial, the detectives continued to gather evidence to ensure a strong case against him. The arrest was just the beginning of the journey toward justice for Sarah Miller. The police were determined to see the case through to its conclusion, providing closure for Sarah's family and the community. David Miller's trial began on March 25, 2021, in the Placer County Courthouse. The courtroom was filled with reporters and community members eager to hear the details of the case. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Sarah Quinns-Bronsel, known for her strong, no-nonsense approach. Quinns-Bronsel presented the case with a clear and compelling argument, outlining how David had killed his wife, Sarah Miller. Quinns-Bronsel emphasized the evidence against David, including the DNA found on the rope, the inconsistent alibis, and the text messages revealing David's affair and his desperation to keep his secrets hidden. She described Sarah as a loving mother and devoted nurse, whose life was tragically cut short by someone she trusted. Quinns-Bronsel argued that David's fear of losing his family and reputation drove him to commit murder. David's defense attorney, Michael Brooks, was a seasoned lawyer known for his persuasive skills. Brooks argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that there was no direct proof linking David to the crime scene. He suggested that the real culprit could be Emile Rochefort or George S. Kessler. Trying to shift the blame away from David, Brooks painted David as a grieving husband caught in a complex situation, insisting that the emotional turmoil might have influenced his actions but did not prove his guilt. Throughout the trial, Sarah's family, including her parents Mike and Linda Thompson, sat in the courtroom, their faces a mix of sadness and hope. They watched closely as the case unfolded, hoping for justice for their daughter. The emotional weight of the trial was evident, with Sarah's parents often seen wiping away tears as the evidence was presented. On March 30, 2021, after several days of testimony and closing arguments, the jury deliberated and reached a verdict. David Miller was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. While there was relief that justice was served, the trial had taken an emotional toll on everyone involved. The sentencing took place on April 2, 2021. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, in a stern but compassionate tone, expressed sorrow for the loss of Sarah and the impact on her family. David's reaction was subdued. He showed little emotion as the sentence was pronounced, reflecting a sense of resignation rather than surprise. Sarah's family felt a sense of closure, though the pain of losing her remained. The trial had been a difficult journey, but the verdict provided some measure of justice. The trial's outcome underscored the community's commitment to ensuring that such tragedies were met with accountability, while also emphasizing the need for continued support and healing for those affected. After David Miller's conviction, life slowly began to return to normal for everyone involved. Sarah Miller's family faced a long road to healing. Her parents dedicated their time to taking care of Mitt and Catcher. They sought counseling to help deal with their grief and support the children through the loss of their mother and the incarceration of their father. Detective Laura Benedicto continued her work with the Roseville Police Department. The Sarah Miller case had been one of the most challenging of her career, but it also reinforced her commitment to seeking justice. Her partner, Detective Julian Collins, was promoted to surgeon, recognizing his contributions to solving the case. Both detectives received commendations for their work. Émile Rochefort, David's former lover, moved back to France. The publicity and stress of the trial had taken a toll on him. He decided to start fresh, leaving behind the painful memories of his relationship with David. Émile continued his career as a personal trainer, finding success in a new city. George S. Kessler, who had been a close friend to the Miller family and another of David's lovers, distanced himself from the scandal. He retired from public life, focusing on personal reflection and maintaining a low profile. The trial had brought unwanted attention to his past, and he preferred to live quietly. David Miller, now serving a life sentence without parole, faced the reality of his actions. In prison, he attended counseling sessions and participated in rehabilitation programs. However, the betrayal of his family and friends left a permanent Julian on him. He expressed remorse in letters to Sarah's family, but the damage was irreparable. Sarah's legacy lived on through the lives she touched. The memorial fund in her name helped many nursing students achieve their dreams, embodying her spirit of compassion and dedication. The case was a stark reminder of the hidden turmoil that can exist behind closed doors and the importance of seeking justice and truth. Sarah Miller's life was cut short by the very person she trusted the most. As we remember her, let us also remember the importance of honesty and the unbreakable bonds of family and friendship.